Hey, Mike, how you doing, man?
Hey Todd, what's going on?
Not
Hold
much.
on, let me make sure this is all adjusted
Yeah,
properly.
yeah.
And
Take your time. Take your time.
is the volume good?
Yeah, you sound good. How about
All
my
right,
end?
good. Yeah, man. Yeah, you gotta look good. You can be all professional with your headphones and everything. That's awesome. You got a nice clean studio. Mine's all trashed and beat to shit.
Well, you've been redoing it, haven't you?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of it right now. I got my intern coming over tomorrow, and so this is that stage where it's going to get worse before it gets better. So you can't see, but down there I've just got piled like all my sample libraries, all of my. I just went through everything, and so he's coming in tomorrow, and tomorrow we're going to take all the bookshelves out and all that stuff because I got to redo the electric. I got to
Right,
redo. So I'm not looking forward to it. There's going to come this point. I'm like holding on to this studio for like as long as possible, and there's going to come a point where I have to just turn off the computer, and then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we got to go. Like we gotta now we gotta like get this thing going. So
That's me like every 6 months. Like I change my desk or I do something.
yeah. It just it usually happens as a kind of like a rite of passage, like finish a project or something like that. Like
Yeah.
I just graduated EIS and that was like, all right, now I'm done with that. Like what do I want to do next? And I was looking around the studio that I hadn't touched in like 4 years and I'm like, oh God, this is just a pit. Like so
Yeah, I don't want to take too much of your time. I just want to talk, man. Like, I don't know if you watched the ones that I've already done, but like you're a little more seasoned than the other guys that I've had. Besides Curtis, I think he's been around for a while. But like,
Right.
you know the game. You know a little bit about it, and you're doing it. And we've talked about this in the past, before.
Yeah, totally,
And,
totally.
I kind
I'm
of wanted you to
totally-
promote Farkle Friday a little bit too, because my listeners, my YouTube channel is starting to grow a little bit, and I know they can use it. So yeah,
I saw that you had 1,000 users, or you cracked that, which is great news. Congratulations
Yeah,
on
thanks.
that. And
yeah, I'm trying to make it like where I was 2 years ago, like had no clue, and like help these people and like show them quick tips and just like how to compose, but not worry about the computer stuff, because that's what slows me down. It slows all of us down. It's like, let's try to focus on the music. So here's some tips and things, and then now I want to try to start getting composers that are actually making a living. So how do you do it? Because I'm trying to myself, and my life is in disarray, man, because I got laid off in October from my job, my full-time job, and so now I'm freelancing, just like what I was doing in my day job, trying to make that work. And then the music's been kind of off to the side a little bit, because
yeah. Well, first off, dude, I'm totally happy for that. And I did actually watch some of them. Like I watched kind of flipping through bits and pieces, and which is some great stuff. You've done one where you did like your Cubase template, and I think I saw one interview. I'm trying to, but I think it's really cool that you're doing that. And it's funny you're mentioning that. Like I'm actually doing a Farkle Friday this Friday. You saw me pinging. I was like, all right. Of course, everyone's like, I don't know what you want to do. I'm like, oh God. And I actually do want to do one on template, but because I just rebuilt and switched off a Sonar, I have like one template so far that I built, and that's for this game that I'm working on. And it's basically like this jazz fusion template, which is cool. I could show it. And but I'm in the middle of rebuilding my orchestral libraries and like taking these old samples and carving them up. And I do want to do Friday on that. But anyways, to your point, I was thinking about one of the reasons I started doing Farkle Fridays again. I took about 6 months off when I was finishing up the film and and then finishing EIS, and I had a couple of video game projects. But I was like, you know what? The world right now, especially if you're not in LA, and this is, I think, a good thing for you.
Yeah.
Me, it's like if it's not in LA, the online community is a really strong way to build it's not a presence, it's like a personality. It's like, I know it's a cool guy, he's got a couple blah, blah, blah. So I think this is a really good thing that you're doing, and it's something that will help you to overcome not being in LA or in San Francisco, which, to be fair, is really becoming less of a thing. I mean,
because we all work remote now with computers, Skype. I mean, you just get on this real quick. Hey, man, here, I'll send you the file, and then do that. So that's why I'm trying to like pull the curtain a little bit and say, hey, like you can do this, but you don't have to be famous to make a living. And we, as a young composer, we go through that in our minds, like, oh, I got to be like, Hans Zimmer, John, name the composer of the day. And it's like, but you really don't, because I've met so many composers that are like, no, dude, I'm making full-time living, and it's like, I've never heard of you. And it's like, yeah, I just have my little niche that I've carved out, and
that's it. Yeah. I mean, like, and you gotta just be flexible about what you are looking for in life. And I mean, a big thing for me was about a couple of years ago. You know what we should? Are you gonna officially start the thing? Because I was gonna say, we're talking about this. We can do
go
this.
ahead, man. Let's go right into it.
Oh,
you watch
just
Joe
being
Rogan,
recorded?
right? You watch Joe Rogan?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
love
So
how
this,
he does this stuff, dude. So that's kind of my approach. It's like, dude, let's just talk, man. Two guys talking,
yeah.
and whatever we talk about, good, you know. So
I love Joe Rogan, especially because I used to teach Jeet Kune Do, and I still box and everything, and so I love him because he's like this entertainer, but he's also like really hardcore into martial arts, and he's really educated. He's one of those guys that I love because he's like, if I'm educated about something, he's like, I really know my stuff. He's like, but I'm also the first dude to let you know, like, I don't know a lot about this particular, and I think that's really cool and very humble to be like, this is what I'm good at, you know. But yeah, so you know, talking to your point about the you don't need to is like, I think what so many of us don't think about is what kind of life do you want to build, and I think that you know, when you are trying to figure out what makes you happy every day. And it took me until I was like 40 to figure this out. Like in terms of like, we always talk about, balance. It was like, what does that mean? It means you got to have work-life balance. And that's these little pithy phrases. It means like, are you happy every day?
Right.
And you know, that when I first started and I was working on a TV show up in New York, which, you know, I won't say the name because I don't like to badmouth, but if you could find it out if you want, it was a really rough experience. I almost quit because it was so non-balanced. It was 14-hour work days for $1,000 a week. That was New York money. The only reason I could survive was because I was here and my wife was working. You know, here, like if I'd been in New York, I was like, how could you live on 50?
You wouldn't be able to make it.
Like, and it was the bullshit. It was just like the whole, and that was a very New York thing. It was really funny. I actually, 10 years later, I had a person in my choir, a really nice young woman, I mean, I'm 44 now. So it's like young is like 30, you know, 30. But she was talking to me, and her husband's an animator, and they were moving up to New York. And I said something about, oh, you know, I worked in the animation industry very, very briefly. I worked on this TV show, and she stopped, like cold in the tracks, and was like, "Dude, you work for those guys?" She's like, "Everybody knows they're the worst to work for in New York." But you know, I was like it was one of those things where it's kind of like, you know, you went to the Amityville Horror House and lived kind of thing, and I was like, oh wow, like. Good job, Mike. You're very full.
It's like everybody knows except you that, you know, it's one of those deals. Yeah, I've been there a few times. Well, also, I know you've told me before, it's like, make sure you have multiple streams of income. That's very important too. You know, not just because like, you know, teach lessons or, you know, do other jobs besides just composing music. And that's one thing I've been, you know, trying to do myself. And it's like, okay, I want to make music like, you know, more of what I do during the day. But right now it's my freelance, my day job that I've done before, because that's what I have the most experience. You know, I've been doing it that's my degree in college. I've done it for like 7 to 8 years. So that's what I know how to do. But it's like, for right now, that's got to be the focus. And then if I can bring the music up maybe 30%, you know, that's great. And then over time, I would like it 50-50. But, you know, got to be.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good idea. I think that you're doing that. And I mean, now here's another thing. I don't know if you're experiencing this, and I did. And this is why every composer is different.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself, I don't want it to be a leading question. Do you find yourself less burned out that you now have little slices of work that are vastly different? You know, because I do. I like actually having, I'm almost everything I do now is music. So that's a good thing. Like, it was funny when I was talking to Sharmi, who's my EIS teacher. He said something about that where I was like, yeah, you know, I haven't, you know, 10 years ago I wanted to be in Hollywood making the big thing. And he's like, dude, you get up every day and all you do is music. And most of what you do is writing music. Like if you're not writing music, you're teaching music, which I only do like 5 hours a week. And my church job, I play, but that's probably 6 hours a week of playing, which is you know, the rest of it. If I'm, and it's good, you know, and it reminds you of things like you know, when I play these church tunes, and they're these really pretty, very simple but very effective little pop tunes, because they really are. Yeah, and you're like, hey man, like, you know, because you know me, I'm like all Jerry Goldsmith and Alan Silvestri, you know, so I'm like, you know, if I wanted to, it's like. Like, woo, like dissonance, and then you hear these little pretty pieces which are like, and you're like, dude, you got to remember that's what 90% of the people brings meaning to. And it's like there's nothing wrong with that. It's knowing. It's kind of like in martial arts, right? It's like knowing when do you want to like throw the jab and when do you want to like throw the kick, and it's like sometimes you need to throw the jab. You can't sit here and be like, I've got this amazing jab, I'm just gonna run around for that moment, right? Like,
dude, I just saw John Williams like 2 weeks ago in Cleveland, and that guy, he's 86, man. He's up there conducting for 2 hours like he's 40. The dude, he's a robot, man. That guy's a machine. He had 3 standing ovations, man. He came back out and just did it again, man. The guy is. I see why he is what he is, man. Like you could just see it, man.
He's a total beast, you know.
He is.
And I heard he's
86, man.
86.
Yeah.
And he's still going. I mean, he's still doing like
he's touring. Yeah.
It's so funny because if you think about it, like he's kind of semi-retired. Like he doesn't really have to prove anything anymore.
No.
So he's basically living like this particular phase of his life. He's loving it because it's like, yeah, I get to work with my favorite directors. It's like, you know,
well, that's what he said when he worked with the Cleveland Orchestra. He played at this the venue, Severance Hall, which is at the Cleveland University. He's like, it was on his bucket list. It's like, for a composer, that's a bucket list thing. And he actually got to play with the Cleveland Orchestra, and he was enjoying it, man. He was loving it, and he's just up there like. I thought he was like 81, 82. You know, I was like, I knew he was in his 80s, but then I like went to Wikipedia just to double check. I was like, dude, the guy's 86 and he's up there for 2 hours just, you know, just like going at it, man. It was just like, wow.
And dude, if this doesn't tell you that, like, you know, it's kind of sad. And this is just, you know, oh, and by the way, it was funny earlier you mentioned, you're like, oh, I'm taking up your time. Like, no, I am done for the day. This is my break. Again, going back to like balance, this, that, and the other. I've been up since 6. I am almost done with this one cue for this one video game, and I worked on something else. And I was like, dude, I need to just be done and just hang out with a buddy and just like shoot the breeze and nerd out with music. So I was like, if it were 4 hours later, this would be a way different drink, you know? But you know, it's funny because music kind of polarizes. We see all these tragedies like Johan's dying, and then who was that? I can never pronounce his name. Activie, the Danish
Avicii or whatever. I think
Avicii,
the DJ.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so sad. These guys are passing away, and you know, they're not necessarily getting burned out. Their bodies aren't burning up, but they're ODing and all this stuff. But then you see someone like Williams or Goldsmith, Goldsmith was like 94 when he died.
Yeah.
So music, you know, the industry, if you manage it right and you stay true to yourself, I mean, it can be the fountain of youth, you know? I mean, looking at Hans Zimmer, I think he looks pretty darn young for his age.
He does.
You know, I think he looks pretty darn.
That's the thing. When you see composers, man, when they interviews, you see some dudes that look like death, man. It's like, you know, like they just work, and then you see like, you know, other guys are just like, dude, you are you sure you're a composer doing all this stuff? Because like you always hear this stuff about like, oh, dude, you're gonna be stressed. You're working 14, 20, which is true. I mean, it's not, you know, it's when there's a deadline, dude, you're on it. Like Giacchino for Star Wars when he did Rogue One. Yeah. That dude had like what 3 weeks or something to do, like, and it's like that's crazy.
Insane. And that's one of those great examples of like, man, thank God he had shed. And like you knew that dude had like transcribed Star Wars and like looked at scores, because then when the moment came, he was like, I just got to get this done, you know. And he did it. It was like 3 weeks, and it was I got to tell you something. And I'm a pretty positive person, because I know that some people were bashing Rogue One and this, that, and the other. Yeah. I thought it was a really solid. I enjoyed it.
There was a few moments where you're just like, okay, but dude, it's like the dude had he had 5 weeks, 6 weeks. It's like, dude, let's see you go write a score like that in 6 weeks.
Yeah, let me tell you something. Like that last year, I ended up having to write a score for this direct-to-cable film that I did, and I did it in 4 weeks, right? And I was really proud of myself. And then I held it up to Rogue One. I was like, I got a ways to go, baby. I was like,
Plus, remember, you're competing with the greatest, you know, John Williams here. It's like, it's never going to be John Williams, you know. So
I mean, what do you think about like John Powell now with the Han Solo? Because he's going to be the next one up, like kind of up on the chopping block.
I'm excited. Right? I'm not really excited about the movie. Like after Last Jedi, I'm just kind of like, whatever, dude. Okay, this is what you're doing. Okay, whatever. You know, and it's like, I liked Williams' score though. I thought that was like, out of the scores he's done recently, that brought really it, man. There was moments in it I was like, oh my God, this is like the original trilogy here he got. And I'm actually excited for John Powell because I actually like his work. I don't know it very extensively. I know like How to Train Your Dragon, and I've heard a few things. I loved How to Train Your Dragon. Like that's like
that was kind of his big.
That's like his Star Wars, you know. That was
like his Back to the Future. His Star Wars.
Like Alan Silvestri's Back to the Future, and
it's so funny to go and see these guys. Like when John Powell did How to Train Your Dragon, I had known about him through Chicken Run and through Born Identity.
Yeah, Born Identity.
So I was always like, well, through Chicken Run, I was like, he was with Harry Gregson Williams, and I was like, oh, because the first one I heard was Born Identity. I'm like, okay, you're a hybrid dude. I get it, because Born Identity, the chopping up rhythms, and it's fine. But and he did Bolt, which is a lot of that same thing. And then How to Train Your Dragon comes out. I was like, dude, you're like legit. I mean, not hybrid's not legit. Yeah. Like you understand the orchestra as its own organism, and you can do things. So
does Harry Gregson what is it, Williamson? Yeah, or whatever. Williams. That's it. He's legit too. He knows his stuff.
Yeah,
Because
and
he
what I
writes on
love, and
paper,
this
I
is,
think, still, doesn't he? Your
if he has
sketches.
time, he does. He certainly knows how to. I think that's one of the ways he kind of got into. Oh, I don't want to. I want to say this is purely me, maybe misremembering. I think that's one of the ways he proved some worth to Hans was that he was a good pen
Well, they all
guy.
come out of Hans' remote control. John Powell did, I think he did, and
Yep.
basically everybody's scoring films. Basically at this point, you know.
Seriously, there's like I can think of like off the top of my head, I can think of like 2 or 3 people who are not somehow tied in through remote control, and that Alexander Desplat, because he basically lived in France and like
That's
built
another
his thing
guy,
up.
man. I'm really I dig his
nice
stuff.
shot.
Yeah.
I like it. And you know, it's funny because people are like, I think he's an excellent composer. I really love a lot of his stuff. And people, he's got a different, more like clockworky style. Like he's got this kind of like wind up, almost like a Steve Reich minimalist-y kind of thing. And it's really, really cool. I don't think it's quite as strongly thematic as like someone like Williams or John Powell. People like kind of busting it. They're like, oh, whatever. It's just like, you know, it's this just a bunch of textures. I'm like, yeah, but he's French. They're all about those textures. I'm just into Debussy and Ravel. They like live for that kind of stuff.
They do.
And so,
he was supposed to score Rogue One. I wanted to hear his score for Rogue One. I thought it was going to be cool, but
I wish, man. And if Disney, you know, you never can tell with Disney, they might release it at some point, but Disney's so big about making sure everything that is shown is always perfectly coiffed. To show a rejected score might be like, it might open up a can of worms with the fans, you know, which is a shame because it's like
they already did with Last Jedi, man. That divided the fan base. I mean, I get it. I mean, I liked it. I watched it again. I bought it, and I'm like, okay, but I just feel like there was some missed opportunities, and it's like, you know, like it's starting to come out though. It's starting to leak now that basically Rian Johnson just said, yeah, I didn't like what JJ did. I'm just gonna do my thing. And it's like, that's what's coming out, dude. Like, basically, JJ wrote up the kind of, you know, the arc, which we all know. Even if you're a composer, you need to know the story arc, you know, and a 3-act structure. Exactly. You should know it. It's very important.
Exactly.
So
come on, it's a no-brainer.
This is what you do. You tell a story through music. But anyway, which a lot of people don't understand that.
Preach, brother. I know. My God.
We're at that. I mean, you're a little bit older than me, but I'm still like, I'm 36. I'll be 37 in December. So I'm like similar. So I get it. And like recently, you mentioned Goldsmith. I've been getting into Goldsmith, dude. I heard Chinatown blew my mind, dude. Because I watched the movie and I'd never seen it, and I was like, man, I want to see this movie. I heard a lot about it, the score. I put it on, dude, and I was like, I was just like, wow, my mind was blown. That trumpet, dude. I was like, okay, I started transcribing like that day. I was like, okay, man, I got to find out this trumpet line. I started figuring it out. And then I just bought
so noir.
an LA Confidential. I watched that one, and he scored that too. And that, oh, God, that's another great score, man.
Well, man, and I'm telling you, like, look, because I teach film scoring over here in Philly, and I got a couple. It's funny enough, I got a couple of the guys on VI Discord, like Sickened is one of my students, and like without fail, I ended up having to introduce, like, he was one of the ones I didn't have to do this to, one of the few, but without fail, I have to introduce them to Goldsmith. They're like, oh, I love film scores, and they're like, and they usually come in, they're like, I love Hans Zimmer, I love Michael Giacchino, I love John Powell, and I'm like, cool. Well, how about John Williams? Like, oh, I love his stuff. And then I'm like, okay. How about Jerry Goldsmith? And they're all like, who? And I'm like, all right. Because he's not known for these sumptuous adventure scores, you know, even though he can do it. Like, I mean, if you ever listen to the score, there's a period of time in the 80s where this is great. And this is something, boy, talking about career lesson and kind of thinking about what you want to do with life and what we all want to do.
Yeah.
There was a period of time in the 80s where Goldsmith was doing all the crappy knockoffs of the big blockbusters.
Right.
So when Superman was released, like, I think it was Golden Globus, like this crappy 80s production company did a knockoff called Supergirl.
Yes, and he scored it. Yeah.
And so he's got a great theme there. And it's like it's like this super like exciting, you know. And then when Indiana Jones made it big, they had Richard Chamberlain do Alan Quatermain and the King Solomon's Mines. Okay. And they had him do that. And it's Goldsmith doing like Indiana Jones, and he does it great. It's so good.
The dude he's awesome. Like, that's I now that, but like I didn't realize, like, basically who scored my childhood was Alan Silvestri, John Williams, and Jerry Goldsmith. That's it, and James Horner a little bit
to a lesser extent. Yeah,
but I mean those three guys is like, that's, I didn't know Jerry Goldsmith scored a lot of the films that I liked as a kid. I always knew of Alan, but for me, when I got into, I'm kind of late to the film scoring game. Like, if you see, I have Back to the Future. That's what it is. I have a poster on my wall. That's It wasn't John Williams for me. It was Back to the Future.
Yeah,
I heard that dude and I was like, oh my God, I love it. And I still do. I have the score from Omni Publishing. I have it and I looked through it.
Yeah. It's good. And he has, oh, by the way, what have you seen Ready Player One yet?
Not yet. I want to.
He
scored it.
He scored it. And I popped it in. And I really like the score, but I like it so much for a couple of reasons. One is I love Alan's writing. I have Back to the Future up there too, and Forrest Gump. I mean, I know all that stuff. All that transcription and stuff like you did. I did all that stuff. The stuff. Yeah, the tritone thing.
Yeah, that's
like
it.
that kind of thing he's doing. It's like tritones apart.
Yep.
But so this is, by the way, how I run my life. I just live in front of my keyboard and just manually ADD noodle things. But he in Ready Player One, not only was he writing great stuff in Return to Form, you could tell he was mapping his music onto a director that understood story.
That's cool.
Because you can listen to the cue. Like I put on a cue, and my wife Sarah, who hasn't read the book, I've read the book, so I knew when something happened, I was like, okay, I think I know where this is in the book. Because you probably figured I'm a total nerd.
I know. I'm a nerd too.
Dude, nerds, it's the way to go.
Star Wars, that's all nerd in my here. Yep, Fallout, dude. I played that game's awesome.
Oh God, it's phenomenal. So Sarah was listening to it and she was like, oh, this is the scene. They're being attacked by the bad guys. They're probably fleeing the particular. I was like, yep. And apparently there's a scene where a very important program artifact, because it's basically an MMO, right? So the whole point is that you can just you can save up and get custom gear.
Yep.
And there's a point where you can tell that the music's building and it's all like adventurous, right? That kind of stuff. And then you hear this, and then you hear this.
Future. Yep.
Right, and you can tell you're like, there's something Back to the Future happening right there. It's so cool because you can tell he just milks it, and so
that's awesome.
But so and that's it was funny. We were talking about finding your niche and kind of what you love to do. That's the other thing that I think that YouTube has been really good at. One of the reasons I've been kind of moving more into trying to get an online presence is that YouTube and Facebook and all that have unified and connected people who have a lot of common interests. Like one of my best friends is a police officer, but he's also an author. He's written 2 books. He's released them on Amazon. He's actually very talented. And he's a big D&D nerd. I'm a D&D nerd. I Dungeon Master for my kids and he does for his. And he just hopped on a Facebook lead yesterday, a feed with a couple of guys out of Danbury, Connecticut, the East Coast Slayers, I think they're called. They're really good. They're awesome. And they just like did this. They're just shooting in the breeze. And like all these hits and all this interest, not because they were like strange and weird, but because it was like, oh yeah, there's
thousands of other people out there that like the same thing you do, Exactly. We're from that generation where we didn't have this, dude. So it's like crazy thinking about it, and like these kids, what they're getting now is like, oh, dude, if you're a musician, just go right on YouTube, start putting your music up, and you're gonna have a fan base within 6 months. It's like that's like unheard of when we were doing it. It's like, dude, I was in my basement and nobody knew what the hell I was doing, and I'd be lucky if a friend knew or even cared. And now it's like, like you said, an online presence is amazing. And
yeah, and I was thinking about we were talking about building a career and all this stuff and what I've been doing, and I've gone through phases. And the first phase of my career was very much the follow the path, do what you're supposed to do. Where like I was in New York and I was doing all right, you got to be apprentice, and I was an orchestrator on this TV show, and then I ended up getting picked up by a music editor for Yu-Gi-Oh, which was great, and then immediately the funding dried up for that, and so then I was like tired, and then didn't even get to score an episode. It's like which was so and I did the whole I was audio director for a startup video game company, and I was flying out to LA and San Francisco and meeting with EA and Sony, and we were doing all the things that you're supposed to do.
Right.
And then about 3 years ago, when all those things were kind of really generating only minor success, I mean, I was still working in church and I was teaching and I was pretty burned out, and I kind of had that revelation, and you and I are talking about this right now about there has to be a way there has to be a way for us to be happy as artists, for us to have this little intersection of the two sets. I've got my 2 little fingers here, making my little Venn diagram circles of what you love to do and what the market will kind of
pay you for.
Pay you for. And if one of those circles gets smaller, the other one can get bigger. And what I mean by that is this: if you're like let's say like, and then this is something that I do. I'm actually, because I have all this jazz background and all this EIS stuff and a lot of transcriptions, I'm very good at multiple genres, many of which people can't do. Like I can write a big band part in like a day. So for library stuff, I can do a lot of variety, which means I don't need to really hunt down a lot of people. I can just pitch stuff to libraries and be like, here's like 4 things that I can do, and here's like 3 tracks in each. Okay. So that gives me a lot of variety and where I can make money for that. Mm-hmm. And that's cool. And that's a sector of my career.
Right.
But there's a sector that means a lot to me, and that is basically nerd orchestral music, like or fantasy, sci-fi. If you look at my CD collection back there, it's like everything from like 1975 to 1965 to 1995. It's like Planet of the Apes and lots of weird. You saw me on a Farkle Friday where I was doing hidden gems, and I was like, yeah, here's this mini series like Merlin. It's like, you know, and like
I remember that one.
Yeah,
dude, I have nerdy stuff. Like, I'm an old soul. I don't know what I am, dude. Like, I just grew up in that weird time because, like, I'm the same way. I come from a rock background, you know, because, like, that was all that was in my house, dude, like, as a kid. I didn't get orchestral music until I found it myself in high school. I, like, went to Walmart and just bought a stack of classical CDs because what did it for me was when Metallica did the S&M album, when they joined with the symphony, I was like, you can do that? Yeah. I was like, holy, it blew my mind, dude. And then it just took me down a rabbit hole because then I discovered Yngwie Malmsteen, Jason Becker, and, you know, the shredders on guitar. I play guitars, all my guitars.
I was going to say, what were you listening to growing up? Like, so you were a guitarist growing up, right?
Yeah.
And so what was showing up in your
Well, I first started, the biggest thing for me was Michael Jackson. I was a kid. And then I was listening Guns N' Roses in like 3rd grade. Listen to how my life is, like how crazy it was. Because like MTV, you know, like that's how I got a lot of this music. Cause I'd flip on MTV in the summer and watch all the music videos. I was watching, so I was like, Michael Jackson was huge on me as a kid. I still like him to this day. So the 80s stuff, you know, like the Beach Boys, you know, that was in there. And then my dad, he listens to classic rock, you know, the 70s. So Jimi Hendrix, you know, Led Zeppelin. No Stones. I had to do that myself. I found that later. He doesn't like the Stones, which is weird.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of them either. I'd rather. I think everyone's like the Who or the Stones. I don't know. Beatles. Yeah, I like the Beatles totally. Yeah. The Stones I couldn't get into. Like if I
got into them now later in life. I like them now. Yeah, I love them. I mean, some stuff. I don't like all of it, but you know, some of it's just kind of like okay. You know, you get to that point where like you've studied so much music and your music brain just goes I need something more, man. I need that, you know what I mean? Like you just like I want more, and I can't just do the whole like you know what I mean? Like you just get bored quickly, and that happened to me very early because I was listening to shredders, dude. I was listening to Yngwie and Paul Gilbert, you know, and Buckethead and all that crap. And
do you remember Michelangelo Baito? Do you remember him?
Yeah, dude, he's from Chicago.
Is he really?
Yeah, he lives in Chicago.
I heard he's the nicest guy.
Oh,
I heard he's just super cool, but that dude could lay waste to a guitar.
He can play both hands. So he's actually left-handed. He's actually left-handed, but he learned the guitar right-handed. So that's how he can play both, because he's actually a left-handed dude. He's crazy. He's crazy. Disgusting.
And he's one of my, like, growing up, I had a little guilty pleasure because, like, growing up, like, you know, again, we're fairly close in age. Yeah. If you love the shredder stuff, it's kind of a little bit of like, dude, really? Kind of like, you like that wankiness. So I would always like, you know, listen to Michelangelo's album, whatever the album I had was. I can't remember the title of it, but it was like, and my friend would come in like, what are you listening to? And I was like, oh, nothing. I was like, like with porn, you know, like, here's some Beatles. Let's listen to that, you know? So, but yes, you started with all the really technical guys. That's probably why you fell in love with classical, because at Malmsteen, he's basically lifting Bach. Like,
it is Bach. It's Bach and Paganini. He's doing the Bach things. No, and then, well, in like 8th grade or 7th or 8th grade, I got into the Doors. So that's my kind of jazzy thing, because they're very jazzy, but they do everything. They do jazz, blues, and rock. And the Doors blew my mind. So I was a big Doors fan. And then I got into Metallica. So I'm more of a heavy metal dude, like, and that's very classical. So like, because they're similar, you know, they're very similar.
Heavy metal is
so
very
that's
similar.
why I like classical. And you know, I got to that point, like, I don't read music like I never did. I'm trying. I'm learning very slowly.
I love that guilty face.
Like you have to, man. Like it's very important. I'm getting better. I've gotten a lot better. And
steps.
It opens a whole new world. But like I play by my ear. I always have. And you know, I just hear it and I feel it and I go. And I don't have to think about it. So when I'm sitting here trying to compose on a piano, which is not my instrument, I'm like lost, man. I'm like, I don't know what to do. And like, so I'm fighting that. I know what I can want to do in my head and here, and then we're fighting the samples. Obviously, that's another freaking nightmare.
God, yes. I had a moment today where I'm doing this Hawaiian cue for this little mobile game. And so I called one of my, he's actually an ex-student of mine who I think is going to become one of my go-to guitarists because he's like it's jazz dude. He's really versatile. And I was like, dude, do you have anything? And he's like, yeah, I can put together some ukulele stuff. And so he sent it over in like an hour, which is awesome. So first of all, right off the bat, live music. Let's talk about live versus samples, right? So I could have sitting here and taken my guitar, and I'm a really mediocre guitar player, and I could have hacked my way through it and sliced it up. But I made the phone call, and it was like 2 hours. It was 2 hours. 2 hours later, he sent me double-tracked acoustic, double-tracked ukulele with a solo over it, all nicely cleaned up. And so that was the first thing. So it's like that's why you hire a live musician, because you like – I don't want to sweat through the samples. The second thing is you put it in, and all of a sudden the live sounds make all the samples sound better.
Right.
So all of a sudden my Scarby bass, which I'm using at a complete, sounds so much better because it's got live ukuleles going against it. And I was like, dude, this is and Will Roger taught me that years ago. Well, a lot of mock-up dudes taught me that years ago. And when I worked on that TV show, that's actually what we did. This is a great little trick, and it's something that I may start doing again because the orchestras are getting so cheap. When we did the TV show, it's funny because I'm going to blur it out.
There's going to be an actual TV show called The TV Show that will come out.
It's fine. It is what it is. Just, every job is not for everybody. Yeah. But what we would do is I would do the entire mock-up using my sample libraries. Just to let you know how old this was. I was using East West Symphonic Gold Orchestra Contact version. Which I still have. It's pre-play, which actually is good because you can actually – I used to go up, open it up in Contact and carve things up to make things work better. But what I did was I had the whole orchestra lined up and I would do the whole thing. Then we would go into a recording session and I would have the first chair of every section. So I would get – live in the orchestra, I would get a woodwind quartet, which is, one flute, one oboe, one clarinet, one bassoon. And I would get a brass, quartet. I mean, some people, the French horn was there, trumpet, trombone, and tuba. And then I get a string quartet. And that would become the first layer of each part. Okay. So if the flute's doing a chord, the top note of the chord, the melody note would be live flute, and then I would mock up flutes 2 and 3. Okay. If the strings were playing a unison line, I would have the 2 violins play their respective parts and layer East West Gold under that. Right. That's a really common trick, and it's super easy. And nowadays, I mean, if you think about it, if you see all these orchestras in Europe, and I know, look, like everything, it's easy for me to say things like, oh, it's only this much money. It's like if you're starting at
$100 orchestra, I think. Yeah.
$100 orchestra. Jay used that. I think he had moderate success. He made it work, but that's the other thing is like you can maybe take that orchestra and you could stripe it, right? And then maybe you could get in and you could audio warp it or you can melt. I mean, I'm using Studio One right now, and the things it can do. I mean, dude. So here's what happened. Here's what I did today. I'm just starting to learn this app because I dropped Sonar. Right. Because we don't have to, but I don't do professional stuff on stuff that's like being supported by a social company. I was
that was Cakewalk, right? They changed it to Cakewalk or something. I don't know what.
Like what happened is like Cakewalk like shit the bed, and like they didn't. Gibson shit the bed. Like basically, Gibson bought it, and I don't know what happened. They ran it into the ground. But then this like social music company out of Europe picked it up, which is totally cool. I think it's great, and they released it for free. But their business model looks to be like let's get social music sharing, and like you can write a piece. It's fine, but I'm like I need something that's deep, hard for writing for film and TV. I want support up the ass for it, know. And so I have two. I have Digital Performer, which I've used in the past, and I decided to give Studio One a shot because the workflow looks very good for library tracks. Mm-hmm. But so this is the nerdy moment thing of just like nerdy tech and like why the power you can do. So Matt, my guitar player, laid the tracks down, and they were really good, but they weren't perfectly aligned performance. They never. I mean, they can't be. It's like
you're never on the beat.
I mean. Right. I mean, maybe if you're like a top LA session guy, but they were really, really good. So I drag all the audio files into Studio One, and they have this thing called Audio Bend. So I highlight this one track. I click Analyze. It detects. Now, this is not a drum kit. It's a guitar. So it detects all the transients, right? Yep. Then I basically quantize it. Yep. Using like just a straight quantize where it's like, okay, I figured out that it's more of like it's a slightly swung eighth note grid or whatever. Okay. So that kind of tightens it up a little bit. Now, by the way, it just tightens it up like it just, moves and stretches the audio with no artifacting. So all of a sudden that particular ukulele line is perfect. Then I highlight that track, drag it up into the groove window. It replaces it with MIDI groove data.
Oh, wow.
I then take that groove data and I drag it back to the other acoustic guitars and to the ukulele, and it locks all them in.
Oh, cool.
So in about 8 minutes, I took all 4 tracks, readjusted the tempo of one of them, and then synced it all. And all of a sudden, they all have the pocket.
That's cool.
Then I played my drum groove in straight 8s, took that groove,
matched
dragged
it to
the
that
MIDI drum, and it changed it. So like MIDI and audio aren't even, it's crazy.
Damn, I could have used that like when I was doing about 3 or 4 years ago. I was doing like some hard rock stuff, and I could have used that. I'm just like I'm old school in the sense of like, because dude, I come back from tape players back in the day where you had a cassette tape player and you got the band, you got a mic. Okay, dude, let's knock it out. No metronome, no nothing. It's like get the drummer, and so that's my like philosophy and my mindset because I'm tactile because I'm a guitar player. So for me it's very hands on and like. Which makes sense with the piano, but I just don't know. I'm not very good. I'm not proficient on the piano.
Well,
I'm working on it.
I think there's validity to that, but I think there's value to that, and I do miss that. I miss building a pocket with an ensemble. Like yesterday, I had my church ensemble down in stairs for rehearsal, and they're more of a pop gospel ensemble. And it was really fun, like finding the pocket. We would put the lead sheet up, and then the bass player was like, "I think we want to go here," and I was like, "Oh, okay, Rob, you want to do this?" That's what you're talking about, and I miss like. But,
me too.
You also got to understand kind of like what you're writing for, and like for example, for a video game score where you're gonna have to do very precise looping and cutting, it's like you just got to lock it to. Right. Even though you've made a groove, it's like a quantized groove, it's like the fakest swing you can swing, right? It's like,
that's the thing. It's just things have changed so much, and it's like I miss and plus you elevate each other, when you're playing and stuff. And the one thing to go back to the oh man. I'm getting over a cold, but one thing I've
learned, me, man. We still got like hours to go, baby.
Yeah, we can talk, man. I have plenty of time. But one thing I realized and I think every freaking composer needs to go do is tomorrow or whenever their next live orchestra is, you need to go right now because there was so many epiphany moments sitting there listening to that. Strings aren't that loud, and John Williams loves the glockenspiel. That damn thing, dude, it's so freaking loud. Oh my God. I didn't realize how loud a Glock was, man. And he has it on like runs just going over and over on most of the songs he played. You could just hear that thing. It cuts. I mean, people forget that things like a triangle, a piccolo, Glock, they can cut through the orchestral. 4 horns can blow your strings out like that.
I have a couple of sample libraries, and there's one that I have Cinebrass, but I've been using it less and less. I've been using an older library called Dan Dean, which you can't get anymore. That's phenomenally sampled. It's actually, I think, better sampled than Cinebrass, but it's only 4 horns. But if you are orchestrating correctly and you have a pretty good balanced template, that thing can freaking 4 trumpets, 4 horns. Those things can blow anything out of the water.
That's the thing with sample libraries. It gives you a false sense of the orchestra because everything's at unity gain. It's like that's not how the orchestra works, man. Strings are not that loud, and they are not playing that hard. And Mike Vert, I've seen, I know you go to his master classes, and he always harps on that, dude. He's like, it's not as loud as you think. It's like, and it's true, man. Like I had so many epiphany moments just sitting there listening to it, and I was like, God, it's just so balanced. And it's like, it's sort of. I mean, because there's some instruments that are just they don't sound balanced, like the Glock. It was just like, and it was like, God, that thing is annoying. It's like, it's just like, but I get it, it's so freaking loud. And then, the timpanis and stuff, those are really loud, but and then you got your woodwinds and strings, but horns, dude, horns are loud. You're not going to hear pizzicato. And one thing I've noticed too, Mike, was that John Williams likes to do a lot of pizzicato bass. He does that in a lot of his tunes, man. Like I didn't realize it. They're not playing full notes, man. They're playing pizzicato a lot. Right.
And I noticed that when I transcribed Harry's Wondrous World, he
played that.
Yeah, he does a couple of things which are really, really cool. One is, you're right, he does a lot of the pits. So he'll go right? And he'll do 2 things. One is he'll do the pits, and what that does is it ventilates the register. It ventilates the vertical register. Yeah. And because then you're not dealing with these weighted, it's all frequencies. It's like it's like having a low synth. It's like doing a rock tune, like doing a Prince rock tune when doves cry. Yeah. But putting a low synth pad the single bass note down there doing that, right?
Yeah,
it would
drone.
just weigh the piece down, right? Yeah, it was like stupid. And the second thing he'll do, which is so cool, and it's a subtle little thing, and this is why I think it's so important to write music, because, well, or at least to be aware of thinking about it like notes on a page or ticks in the piano roll. He'll push the downbeat off. So it'll be the same harmonic thing. So he'll go ba da 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 da, and the second time he goes ba da da. He'll wait on that pizzicato till the second beat. So he'll go wait bum dun da da, and so you're still hearing the harmonic information, but it's like shifted a little bit. And I started doing that on pieces here and there for variety, where I'm like, you know, if I'm doing an A and an A prime, and I'm like, look, man, I want to like. I did that on the Alpha Star piece that I did, where I was like, you know, the one that I ripped off Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, I remember that.
I would do that. Like I would push it off to the side, and it doesn't change the voicings that you're doing, but it just gives this little shuffle, you know.
And Williams' stuff is very bouncy like that. It's a very dun. I've noticed that because like listening to his pieces, and I've just noticed like it's starting to come out in my writing a little bit. You know, it's like I'm starting to. I was like, that sounds like Williams. It's like, you know, and he does that. And I noticed another epiphany I had too was thinking in lines, because I was watching the violin. I sat right by the violin, so I was on the right side but left side of the stage. Yeah, so I was sitting right, but stage left. Right. And just watching string players, and it's like, as I'm a guitar player, they hardly move their fingers, man. It's just like they're just like do 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 do, and they go up a little bit, and they're back, and it's like it's so crazy. I mean, I couldn't see the rest of the orchestra, but it's like, I'm telling you, if you're a new composer, or if you've only composed with sample libraries and you've never seen a live orchestra, you need to get your ass into one, because you start to see what virtuosity the instruments are capable of, and then you stop thinking like a piano player. And that's the big thing, because if you're a piano player, like, okay, like the idea of doing a fast run like that is like pretty hard. But let's say I wanted to have 3 flutes doing this, but this fast, right? You couldn't play that on the piano. You could maybe click it in, which is why a lot of people start clicking stuff in, and I get it. Or they just say it's too difficult. But if you write to sheet music, you can just do that really quickly. And that's the kind of virtuosic stuff. And when you go and see an orchestra, and you're like, wow, they could do that. I could do these triads and just sweep them up. And then, you know, and that's why you also have to listen to the right music in terms of like not just John Williams and, you know, and then of course all the classics like Korngold and Steiner and, you know, and Bernard Herrmann, who's, you know, funny enough, like you don't listen to him because he doesn't do those virtuoso things, but just the different colors that he does. But yeah, these instruments are so fast. You watch these, like you watch a virtuoso flute player, and go back to Yngwie Malmsteen, they're like, it's like, what?
Yeah, they're like, yeah, oh, whatever. That's like 3rd grade stuff, baby. It's like it's college here, you know. So,
well, and they sight read everything, dude. It's like insane. It's like half the time that's their first time playing it, you know, or you know, they've played it a little bit. They've did parts and stuff, but for the most part, like Hollywood players, you know, if you put a piece of music in front of them, they're just like they sight read it and play it. I agree. The elevation of talent for that now, and we have over where I teach, we do a small ensemble recording every year, and it's always a small. There's the other thing, which is if you can, you know, if you want to learn to like write for real instruments, you go to the orchestra. Absolutely, go and like do even if you're not a student, you can usually sit in on a rehearsal session. A lot of orchestras will say, if you're a professional composer, you can call up and say, I'm a professional composer. I'm researching blah blah blah. Can I sit in on a rehearsal at the convenience of the conductor? And like 9 times out of 10, they'll let you do it. That's cool.
You know, you may have to sit back and they're like, don't talk to anybody, but whatever, dude, just go with the score. And, you know, it's a freaking masterclass. But the second thing is go to like any university and just find small ensembles and just put stuff in front of them. Like I've written a couple times for these small ensembles at U of Arts. If it's a light day, I'll throw something in front. Like I did a woodwind piece that I wrote for my daughter's birthday, and it was a little 1-minute piece, you know, and learning so much by just how they actually, it's not even where you make mistakes, but like, for example, here's something that I realized, and this is just going back to these guys and how fast they are. They sight read it twice, and the first time was totally serviceable. The second time was like laser, right? It was like once to get it, and they're like, oh, I get it. And then you know, you got to think about the job of these performers is to be able to comfortably be in the flow for the entire piece. So they'll notate stuff on your part score that makes life easier for them. So here's one thing. and this is a great example of composing versus performing. This was a very tonal piece, so I put a key signature in it. I think I did put a key signature in it, and I was like, okay, it's in D minor, so that's fine. And when we left the key signature, I would, put the sharps and the flats. Well, these guys, even in the key signature, even though there's a key signature, they wrote the B flats everywhere. Oh, yeah. And I asked, interesting. And they're like, I don't even want to think about it. Like, I just want to be playing and playing and see the B flat and no. Yep. So people now ask me, they're like, I don't write in key signatures anymore. And they're like, well, why don't you do that? I'm like, because when I saw a real person do it, who's like a session musician, they basically are like, these are what I do to like make it as easy as possible because I don't want to have to think. I want to be in the flow. I don't want to be like casting my mind back and was there 2 flats or 3 flats in the key signature?
That's why I never understood that. Here's one brave thing I ever did, because like you got to remember, like I wasn't professionally trained musically or nothing. Had a couple guitar teachers, and they just show you. I know tab. I could read tab like music, like guitar tab.
Oh yeah,
I could read it like I could just. But so I took Theory 1 in college. Now think about this. I have no musical training. I got a D in it, so there you go. It was hard as hell, dude. But I mean, I was learning figure bass and everything, man. And Theory 1, and like the key signature thing. I'm going back to that because I was like, why don't you just write it there so you know what note it is? It makes it so much easier. No, you have it over here on the staff, and it's like, but when you get in the real world, they're actually doing it that way. So there you go.
Yeah, that's once again theory versus practical. I mean, boy, now I do need that drink. Now I'm getting all riled up, but no, because it breaks my heart to hear that. Like, you're like, I got a D. And I'm like, all that meant was that you weren't very good at that moment in time in dealing with Baroque music. That means nothing to your ability as a composer or a musician. It's bullshit.
It helped a lot, though. It started getting things up in my mind, like turning, like thinking about and obviously, that was like 2001 or 2. So it was a long time ago.
Yes, 15
and I like, so I would do some music, and I think in like 2006, when I graduated college, I like stopped doing music for like 3 or 4 years. Like I did touch, because I got so burned out, man. I was playing guitar all the time, and I had to break up with my ex, and she's the one that pushed me to, because she played the flute, so she played in all that. So I got to hear flute and all this crap, and I felt so weird because like she's a musician and like I'm supposed to be a musician and I don't know how to read music, so like it felt me like weird, like I was like I should be like that, So I had to problems with that, and then finally like one day I was like, dude, I miss playing guitar, and I just picked up my guitar and started playing, and I started writing songs, and I was doing I was doing like the band stuff, hard rock stuff. And then one day I started hearing ambient music, and I was like, it's a guy on YouTube, Andy Olfling. He does ambient music on guitar. And I was like, dude, this is so cool. And it's like
super effects driven, like very spacious.
But you got to think about it. It's like looping, and it's like you got to come up with ideas on the spot and make it sound good and interesting. So I was like so on my YouTube channel, if you check, I have like 20 some videos of me doing ambient. Those were just exercises for me. So I'd pick a chord progression and try to do stuff off of it. And that was exercises for me to learn, chord progressions. And then, so I was going to do an EP, and I was like, I need string sounds, or I need, like an orchestral stuff. So I started searching that stuff, and I got Albion 1, and there you go. And then it just like got me in the rabbit hole, and I found Mike Verda. I think I've known about Mike since like 2012. So I took one of his master classes. And like, so he started, I was like, I just need this for rock music. I was like, I just want to learn, maybe it will help me. Well, then it starts talking about orchestral. So then I was like, dude, this is what I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to write for the orchestra. A dream of mine was to go to Berkeley, because Steve Vai, he went to Berkeley, and I love Steve Vai.
And so did Alan Silvestri. Alan Silvestri was Berkeley grad too, or at least he went there. He may not have finished. He may have moved to LA, but here's again, going back to what a great time it is to be a composer. Like, it's great to go to Berkeley, and you can definitely get knowledge. And if you listen to Adam Neely, who's that great jazz player, he talks a little bit about Berkeley, and he talks about he's very complimentary about it. He's not like whatever's a waste of time, but he basically talks about some of the biggest advantages are the alumni network, which to a lesser extent, I experienced at NYU. I mean, I went to school. It's funny. It's like, this is one of his kids is doing his own thing. The guys I graduated with from NYU include the following people: Austin Wintory, right? From Journey and from John Boyd, who is like Sundance darling. He's the only Sundance film. I think he's represented by the top agency. James Sizemore, who is Howard Shore's #1 orchestrator / assistant. And there's like one other, Christy Marshall, who's like high up in one of the top production libraries in LA. And it's like, and then there's Mike, like hanging out in Philly, like doing his thing. But what I'm saying is, I learned more. And I loved NYU. I have nothing bad to say about it. I think
Right.
it was great. I studied with some great guys. A guy named Mike Patterson and Sonny Kompanick, Ron Sadoff, all great guys. But I learned more about writing music professionally in the 10 years or so, because I graduated in 2006, in the 10 years or so afterwards, through self-study, through just getting hungry. So like, it's tough because we've been raised in this environment of like, the degree is important. You should go and it was something that our parents did, because at that timeline it was like, well, your value and your ability to earn is based upon degree. And this kind of, as one of my martial arts teachers used to say, it's a chevron on the I like me wall, right? There's my diploma.
It is.
I mean, and it's I think, boy, if there's a lesson I can say to upcoming composers and to you too, which is, don't regret that you haven't gone to a formal training. It doesn't mean anything. There's a couple of advantages that it gives, but they aren't deal shattering by any. One is an alumni network. Okay, that's okay, but it doesn't help you that much.
Right.
Two, it does expose you to the repertoire, and that can be cool. But you'll know, I don't know, I put it on this Discord. I put a giant list of like classical pieces to listen to. I'm like, there's the next like 3 years of your life.
Right.
So I just solved that problem. And I'm not saying I'm so great. I'm just like,
no, I agree. Because like I'm one of those people. I've always been a self learner. Like I'll go out and find it myself. And I was pretty heavy into listening to music. So I've absorbed so much music because like I love music. Like outside of composing, I just love listening to music and finding new music and being inspired and you know and so I've listened to so much music and it's all up there, some way. And it starts coming out. It's like for me it's connecting the dots. Bringing that and connecting it. Well, how do you write that?
So where are you at right now when you're like, because right now you said you're really starting to dive into the cinematic orchestration. How are you kind of putting together, like, what's your workflow like when you build themes and that kind of stuff? Like, how do you kind of like
try to build themes?
We are always trying, baby. We're always trying.
Well, I think for me, it's like melody for me, like usually comes pretty easy. It's the chords, like how to put, I mean, now I'm getting it, how you would make a chord on a melody. You just match it up with whatever, let's say you're playing E flat. Well, what note is in a E, in a chord, is a third fifth. So I know how to do that stuff, sort of. It's like for me, it's just learning because I'm an improviser. Because I play guitar, so I can improvise on the guitar and come up with cool stuff. Because I go off feeling, So trying to translate that with playing on a piano that I don't play, it's very hard.
Yeah.
So that's that I'm fighting all the time. But so I think I used to start with chords. Like I would start with a chord progression and then write a melody on top because usually that comes easy for me.
Yeah, it's a very guitar thing because you built your day around various chords and various things. Yeah, which is a great way to get started. Yeah. That's fine. You know what you could do too, and some people have done that, and is you could sing it in, and then take your singing and drag it into Melodyne, and that generates MIDI notes.
Yeah,
that's
I have
cool.
an app. It sounds so easy, but like when you're in the moment. You're like, you don't think about it. You're just like, oh, that's a cool idea. It's like one of those things you need to start exercising and, getting used to a habit. It's habit. It's building habits. It's basically, and that's what composing is. You got to show up every day and do it for, at least 30 minutes a day. And you got to exercise that muscle. And that's what's happened to me over the last couple of weeks is I've been on a couple projects for freelancing stuff. And it's like, I'm not writing as much. And I know when I don't write, like the well feels there's nothing there. Like today, I sat down here and tried to compose something. Got a couple of good ideas. I'm like, that's crap. Deleted it and then closed my dog. I was like, screw it.
And some days you have to do that, especially when you're starting out. Some days you have to flush the garbage. There's a great book that I read called Living the Artist's Way. It's by a woman named Julia Cameron. This was years ago when I wanted to become a composer. Because that's the thing is people don't know. There's no now. Once again, now it's changing because of the internet. But there never. When you and I grew up, there was no. If your parents weren't artists, they didn't know how to prepare you for a career as an artist. Nope. They were like, my dad was a stockbroker or a commodities broker. I was a teacher. So they're like, I don't know how you become a musician. You go to LA. What do you do? You go to school. You must have to go to school.
Make a rock band and become famous or get a record contract. Like, that's how it was for me. My parents aren't musicians. I'm like the only musician in my family. Well, my grandpa, he played guitar. My aunt played a little guitar. But outside of that, like, I don't know where I get it from. It's just like one of those things that just happens, like you just I like music.
Yeah, it skipped four generations, and it's like
well, my dad, he
so,
loves music, so I mean, like the joy of music, like he loves listening. That I get, that's where I get it from. But like the wanting to play music, I don't know where that comes from.
No, I don't know. I think a lot of people. I don't know. I kind of fell into being a composer. I don't mean fell in like I always knew I wanted to, but when I say I fell in, it was those moments where I would be doing a piano lesson and I would start changing the way the Mozart piece
was.
Yeah, I was like, well, I think he wants to do this, and then she's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I would do, this." And yep. It's a funny thing. When I do pieces with my choir, we have a really good choir here in this little town of Narberth. We're like this little town of 800 people. And we're doing 4-voice Palestrina and 20th century French, which if you've ever listened to Palestrina is like not easy to sing. And I don't know, I've just found these great people.
In college, I think we listened to some of that stuff. I remember Gregorian, like we went through the stages of music,
Renaissance,
I'm sure I've heard it. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Renaissance music, which is all like different voices, rippling across imitation, so even to this day, it drives my choir director nuts because I'll be playing through a piece that we're gonna do, and I'm like, dude, I would have done this totally differently. She's like, this is William Byrd. This is like a legend. And I was like, whatever.
It's funny you say that because I was the same way with guitar parts, man. Like I'd learn a song, I'm like, well, it'd be cooler to do. I think like I do this thing every month. I do track reviews, so I have composers send me stuff, and like that's my strength. Like when I hear something, I could tell you right away. No, that doesn't work. Do this, do that. But when it comes to my pieces. Yeah, it's like nothing, dude. I'm like, oh God, why can't I be like that with my own music?
I know it's so hard for me to. I'm the same way. It's like, and if I'm teaching or one of my students, I can look at a piece and be like, oh yeah, you want to do this, you want to do this. Yeah. And I think it's maybe because we have like zero emotional investiture in it or whatever. I don't know. Which is funny because in this weird like Zen paradox, I've become much faster as a composer. I've had to train myself to not give a shit about what I put down. Like
that's what I'm battling. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, I still like, and so that's why in a sense, I kind of get the giggles when I'm like, like on Farkle Fridays, if I'm like showing a piece that I do and I'm like, look at how I ripped this off. I have the giggles because I'm like trying my best to not put any value in what I wrote because if I do, then I'm going to start micro picking at it instead of like getting the piece done.
That's what I do. So, and that's a good lesson, man, because I think we all do that as artists and as composers it's got to be perfect. And it's like, just get it out, flesh it out, just get it out on paper or in your DAW, then go back and massage it. But for some reason, I just want to do it right then. And then you spend 40 minutes on that little piece and then you forgot where you were going to go or you lost the inspiration. So that's one thing I'm starting to do is discipline myself, just get it out. I'm trying to do the piano sketch thing. But like I said, I don't play piano, so it's very difficult for me, and I usually just pick an instrument up and start doing something, or I'll hear something that inspires me and I start building it from there. So I probably make it harder than it needs to be. But
I probably do awful things to myself when I shouldn't have to do this.
I'm torturing myself.
I don't know. I agree. It's like I totally agree with what you just said about the idea of like just get it out there. And various people mention it in various ways, but the idea of you get better at doing something by finishing doing it. Yes. And so that means that a lot of times you have to that's why I'll rarely go back. I just posted a piece up somewhere, and it was an old piece that I did 2 years ago, and I got some feedback. It was good feedback, and I was like, yeah, it was a piece to try out a template. It was a pitch for a video game. I ended up getting the video game, and I was like, I'm not going to go back and redo this because I don't want my life to be constantly going back and improving. My job is to write more music every day. Yeah. So like sometimes you got to let the piece be what it is, because the next time I have to write a piece like that, I'll be faster because I'll have done it, if that makes any sense.
You'll learn like why it didn't work, or you'll know, hey, I did this last time, let's try this, or because I've learned new things, new tricks and tools. Yeah, I'm trying to transcribe more. Like I said, the fault for me is like, okay, I could transcribe it out, hear it, play it on the piano, but I don't know how to notate it. So how am I getting anything? You see what I'm saying? So where am I getting the value? Yeah, I can play it, hear it by my ear, but like I know the value of transcription is seeing it on paper, how it works, and all that stuff. Yeah. Rhythm is hard for me. I don't know how to notate rhythm. I could tell you notes, on the staff. Sure. That's easy. Sure. It's the rhythm. And I bought a book, and it's just discipline, man. I got to, sit down and do it. Yeah. And
I'm trying to think of like how I learned transcribing drum parts. That's how I did, because I'm a drummer. Right. That's actually the other instrument. So I'm a very good piano player. I'm a really pretty poor guitar player. I'm actually I used to be a pretty solid drummer, because I grew up on all the progressive rock stuff. Right. So it's like, I was like, 7/8 for me was like, oh yeah, this is easy. But So
You like Dream Theater then?
oh, yeah. Well, and I was even early because I was a little older. So Dream Theater, I liked them a lot, but I loved Rush and 70s Genesis back when Phil was hopped up on cocaine.
That dude's, he's not. I listen to all that stuff too, man. Pink Floyd, and I've went through like different things, man. Like, you know, when I was a kid, I was listening to the hippie stuff, you know, 60s rock, and then I went through the Doors thing. I still love the Doors to this day. They still blow my mind. Like, you'll hear things that you're just like, whoa, you know, like I didn't hear that before. And that's how you know you found a good band, is when you can go back and listen to it 30 years later, 20 years later, and you're finding things. Pink Floyd was that for me. Like, Pink Floyd. I love Pink Floyd too. David Gilmour, that guy can say more with one note than Yngwie Malmsteen says with 600.
Oh my God, he's so talented. Yeah, and he's so just earthy with his style of solo. His solos aren't pretentious. They're like, I mean, not that it's, but like, you know, there are guys I love like Steve Howe, who and he'll do some really pretentious solos, and you're like, dude, you're just kind of wanking, you know, like, you know, whatever. But it's Gilmour stuff is always so soulful. It's so good. But
he knows how to speak. He knows how to talk.
Yep. But I would say that, man, my advice is definitely like learn to write out drum parts, because here's why. If you do a drum part and a drum tab, it actually shows you the rhythmic breakdown, because you have one line for the hi-hat, one line for the snare, one line for the kick. So it gives you the ability of being like, oh, when I'm hearing this pattern, this is how it's breaking down in 4/4. I mean, you still have to learn like time signatures and all that. But then when you go to a melodic instrument, I think it's a lot easier, because you're like you're thinking about it like a drummer, and you're hearing that
rhythm.
The rhythm of the thing.
I mean, I probably know all the rhythms because I've heard it in all the music, and it's absorbed. It's just, like I said, it's connecting the dots. And Mike Verda's masterclass has helped a lot, because he has a way of teaching, as you know, like he just makes sense, you know. And like I think a lot like him, and it's how, even like when I watch Farkle Fridays, like there's stuff that you say that I'm like, that you say it differently than Mike says it, and it makes it registers a little more than me, because you know, so you can't have too many teachers, you know. It's like it's so great.
And going back to this world, this is a place where everybody wants to share, you know what I mean? Like, people were asking me like, why did you do Farkle Fridays? I'm like, you know why? Because when I was 20 years old and starting out, nobody helped me, and I'm not saying I have all the answers, and I certainly am a very specific, I mean, I've carved out a niche where I'm kind of in that second, probably even third tier of professional composer, meaning like, you know, if you, I got signed to do 2 feature films this year, and they're both going to probably hopefully end up on Sci-Fi. And, and if they happen, I'll tell you the names of them, because when you see them, you'll be like, dude, this is trash. It's like a.
But you're doing it though. See, that's the thing, and I think we got to get over that. You know, it's like, but you're making a living, dude, and you know, sometimes you have to do shit. You know, you're not always going to do the work you love. You know.
And it's also about finding. So that's a really good point. And here's the great little thing you got to think about is talking about following what people say you should follow versus listening to your heart. And here's what I mean by this. So when I said, and this is why it's also important, I think, in our career to regularly ask ourselves very specific questions. Here's what I mean by this. When I first said I wanted to score films, I had the whole thing, I'm going to go to Hollywood, I'm going to do this. Yep. And there's some Facebook groups now that are talking a lot about a perspective, which Richard Kraft is a big guy on, and which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I remember that post. Yeah.
And it's fine. It's great. But, you know, I noticed something. There's a certain, not on perspectives, but in the industry, certain times as people are coming up, they'll turn up their nose at certain genres or certain budgets or certain this, that, and the other.
Right.
And for the longest time, I felt very uncomfortable, because I was like, I kind of want to work on those films. Being my age, I grew up on crappy 80s action movies. Seagal, Van Damme, right? Crappy. I loved crappy sci-fi, right? Like Schwarzenegger. I love that stuff. And then I had an epiphany about 3 years ago when I got approached to do this direct-to-video film, that I was like, do you realize that all the people that we love, Goldsmith, Horner, Polydorus, they all did it.
And
they
Williams.
all got their teeth there. And Williams did Towering Inferno. Goldsmith did like Gremlins and like King Son. Horner did Commando, right? I mean, like, Commando with like steel drums for like no good reason. That was a weird freaking score. I was like, I know, speaking ill of the dead, but I was like, dude, what are you thinking? Sylvester did Predator, which is wasn't supposed to be nearly as good as it was in terms of the film. It just was directed by an amazing action director.
He did some weird stuff too. Have you seen Verda's masterclass on Silvestri? He pulled up some gems from like the 70s. I think he did Chips. He did
He
Chips.
did Chips.
Yeah.
He did the Great Doberman Robbery, which was his first movie with an old Fred Astaire. Oh yeah, I know.
So
all
every
that.
composer's done shit. I mean, we've all did that,
Right.
you know. So,
and not
but you
only
learn
that,
from it. You learn things out of that experience, you know.
yeah, and not only that, a couple of good things, and I finally ran into this when I worked on this film. And here's, again, going back to what you like. So I was talking to Sarah, and I was like, listen, I have this kind of thing where, you know, these kind of movies that I actually really want to write are getting poo-pooed by the community, but the movies that a lot of the community is trying to write to build their career are movies I'm not interested in. Like one of them is like, oh, I just finished this documentary, and I'm like, dude. Throw a rope over this rafter, you know. But that's when you start to realize also how big the industry is. I'm like, there in the niche. I was like, you know what? There's a niche for guys like me who want to do low budget action and fantasy, not low budget,
dude.
like tongue in cheek, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I found out. When I worked with this director that I worked with last year, and I loved working with him, and I'm going to work with him this year on 2 films. And they're these kind of low budget, tongue in cheek action horror things, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's having as much fun as all of us. They're just having a ton of fun. They're like,
cool.
he's not even trying to like, you know, make like the next great, you know, Citizen Kane. He's making, and the movie that I did last year was kind of a psychological sex thriller, kind of a body heat.
I want to hear that, dude, because I remember you talking about it.
Yeah, I'm so embarrassed about the score. I didn't know what I was doing with Hollywood Strings, and I pulled it out.
Yeah,
of
that's right. That's right. You got Hollywood Strings.
Yeah. I actually pulled it out. I just and not because it's not a good sound, but because I now know what I want to do with my template, and that's fine. That's another thing. But yeah, I'll post it. I will send over some cues of it because I actually loved the film, and I was able to really help the director out. And that was the other thing. Is like if a film. You know, it's funny. You see the difference between film and video games a lot of times. People try and equate them the same way as like, well, you know, your film needs music and your game needs music. I'm like, your game actually doesn't need music as badly as a film does for many of the genres. Like, it is what it is. And people trying to say, you know, that's another reason why having your eggs in more than one basket. Like, I still write for video games, and I still will go and pitch every so often, but they're not my only thing because not every video game needs the kind of music that I like to write, and not every video game needs music.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know, instead of chasing a small pond or whatever it is, instead of trying to fish in a small pond where everyone else is fishing. Like I remember there was one time I pitched for a major game by BioWare, and it was like my one brush with like greatness. And of course I lost the gig. Of course I did. But one of the many reasons I lost the gig was the dude who got it ended up on his own dime hiring 8 or 9 studio musicians, like flute, oboe, ethnic, recording them in his studio and then mixing it and getting it professionally mixed and sending it to BioWare as a demo.
Oh, wow.
So the dude was like, oh yeah, here's this like ethnic flute, and it's like LA's top ethnic flute, right? And it's like, oh yeah, here's like the French horns, and it's like 3 of the horns that worked on, you know, whatever at the time, like the Phantom Menace or whatever it was. Right?
That's the thing. Now it's the demo, man. Like if your demo sounds good, they'll hire you.
Yeah. So you know, so you got to find where you can be happy. So the other thing is, it's about knowing what you can offer. Like when I go to these directors who are doing slightly lower budget films, and I'm like, look, the trick that I offer is I'm like, I can't. If you want to hire live workers, that's great, but I can get something pretty darn close for a lot less money. It'll take a little longer and things like that. But
sorry, man.
that can be a really good. I mean, that was one thing when the director came to me. He's like, I really want. You're gonna die on me. Don't die on me.
What's your template looking like now? Are you still working on it?
I just started. Yeah. So and here's so I'll actually tell you what I had and what. First of all, I had to trash everything, and here's why. I rebuilt. All right, I'm going to be a nerd for a second to explain this. So I customize all my instruments, right?
Yeah,
I think
I know that.
Right?
Yeah, you go into Contact.
So what happened was I had done version 2 of my template last fall, last summer.
That, yeah.
And I had used Contact like 5.75 in November, and I'd upgraded all my custom Contact instruments. And all that is just a little wrapper, right? I'm using the and all that. Well, then when I rebuilt my system in February, I didn't go to 5.7. I went back to 5.6 because there's something weird with it. So now all those custom instruments like can't be opened anymore, which is fine. I had to rebuild them all anyway. So, but I trashed it. So like my template is really like starting from scratch. So what I'm doing right now, and you know, this is a good thing. Let's talk about templates here. Okay. So what I'm doing right now is I had, and I'm rebuilding. I think it's important to have several templates that are 80 to 90% ready to go for specific genres. And this is also because I do a lot of library music. So for example, the template that I'm using right now is, I call it my golf jazz template because I do it for like pop fusion jazz. Yeah. And that has different instruments than my production music library one, which I'm in the middle of building. And that has different one than my custom orchestral one, which is that's going to take the longest. Okay. So for example, I always work backwards from how I figure out what I want in my template is I go and I listen to a lot of production library music. So when I listen to golf jazz, what I heard was, I was like, okay, I'm hearing a drum kit, an electric bass, several multi-track guitars, maybe a solo instrument, but really not really, a piano, and a couple keyboards, and then maybe some ancillary stuff like shakers and bongos and congas. Right. So for that, I just built, I loaded up Easy Drummer, which is what I use. Yep. I loaded up a Contact instrument because Contact, if you get Complete, which I have, has a lot of really good drum kits. There's a studio drummer kit there that's really good. So and those two, and then I loaded up Battery. And the reason I use Battery is because Battery has a lot of those electronic loops and more like ticky-tack things. Oh yeah, they have some good stuff in there. Yeah, and actually an old library called Stylus RMX, which I'm getting back into. I remember that. Yeah, I'm going really vintage. I don't know why. Is that from Spectrasonics, right? Yeah. Yeah, these Spectrasonics. So those all go into a drum bus. Then I've got a space. Let me see. I got the list here. Then I've got a space for basses, and all that is one. Yeah, I've got one bass loaded in Contact, and then I've got an audio track ready to go for live bass. Then I've got 2 tracks loaded for guitar, 1 acoustic, 1 electric. I use shreddage for electric, and then I use some acoustic. And then 4 tracks, audio tracks loaded for guitar, just muted and ready to go. Yeah. And then I have a piano loaded, I have Lounge Lizard, and I have a Hammond organ, an old Hammond organ. And I think that's pretty much it. So my template is just that's designed to get me up and running quickly. Right. That one is not mixed at all. It's just kind of all set with levels. Chillbot likes to mix his, and I need to start doing that. The production library one, which I think is the one that you're kind of asking about, which I like a lot. There's 2 ways to write for orchestra, for digital orchestra. One is to do what they call write to the samples, and one is to make the samples do what you want. And there's a trade-off, and one's in speed and one's in if you listen to, who are our gurus that are mock-up gurus? Thomas Bergerson, right? Yeah, he's good. To a lesser extent, I've got a dozen people. Alex Temple, who now works for Riot Games, is one. These guys are all old school. Craig Charmat's one. Will Roger is one. Will Roger just did Call of Duty World War II. He did the Lara Croft and the Temple of Osiris. These guys are all mock-up, gurus. Oh, yeah. And if you go and Leon Willett's another one. They just are really, really good. And if you go and look at what they did, they were opening up their orchestral template, carving stuff up. They were flipping crescendos to make decrescendos inside, the wave editor. You know what I mean? They were they would take a sustain patch and they would drag over a staccato patch and crossfade them so you can get a pa. This is how deep. And that's why you were saying is your template ready? I'm like, no, because that's the kind of stuff I got to do. I got to do that with sonic implants. And I don't even do that. I just try not to go down that road. But in the day that we live, you have to. It's more production now. That's the thing. It's sad to say. And it's what you want. It's what do you want out of it? So again, going to that, okay, so for production music, what I mean is the kind of stuff that just shows up in TV or whatever. Yeah. I write to the samples. I find a library that has a great sound that I like, that has some articulations that I will use a lot, and then I write to those. So for me, I don't actually have that much in the orchestral stuff. I use Spitfire Albion 1 and Symphobia and the Albion 1 Legacy because I bought that way back when. Yep, me too. And those are fantastic. You can do so much here. I'll just show you. I'm just going to quickly load up. Here's just the Albion 1 strings. This is the Albion 1 strings here, just out of the box, right? They sound great. Oh, yeah. But what you can do, if you know what to do, you can double them. So I'm going to double Albion 1 with my Albion Legacy, right? So now I'm dealing with – hold on a sec here. I'm just going to quickly loading those up. Okay. So now I'm doubling. Here's Albion 1 by itself. Right. Now I'm going to double that with Legacy for that bleeding. Right. Now I'm getting a lot more bleed. Now I double that with Symphobia. These are the kind of things, the tricks you do in production to make things sound a lot bigger. It's just layering. Yeah, layering. Let me load up. So now these are the 3 string sections and you'll notice I'm not using I use very little single families. I'm using mostly ensembles because I need to get stuff out fast.
Right.
So here's Symphobia. So I'm going to start to add them all at once here. And then so here is just the Albion by itself. Right. Now I'm going to add the Legacy.
Which I think Legacy sounds better than the newer one, but that's just me.
I think in many ways it does, actually, but you can't get it anymore. And now I'm going to layer in
it.
Oh, you have it? Yeah.
That's the first one I bought. It was the Legacy, or not? It wasn't called Legacy. It was just Albion 1. And then right after I bought it, they did the upgrade to Albion 1, the newer thing with the eyeball thing, and then they did the revamp again. But I always liked the Legacy one.
Me too. There's actually some patches that I prefer, the octaves, the cellos and basses, and octaves, the low winds. So, I mean, you can see that just by having these 3 libraries.
That's something that would come with time. Like, you would not really get that right off the bat, knowing to do that stuff and knowing that you touched on something to work fast, which if you're under a deadline, you got to work fast.
Right. So to that point, you're absolutely, you got to work fast. And that means, so there's 2 things that have to happen. One is, there's 3 things. You have to, for doing production library music or TV especially, you got to have your craft down. And your craft isn't necessarily just straight music theory. It's knowing what the genre, like I've done a lot of stuff for like crime dramas and like reality TV, like Dr. Phil's psychological drama stuff, like that kind of cheesy stuff.
Yeah.
And which is fine. But I know that vocabulary. So you watch the TV and you understand the vocabulary of that. You're like, okay, it's a lot of these like piano strings and ticky-tack stuff. And then the second is go through your libraries and find those dream patches, the ones that are super fun, and load them in. And I get a little bit of flack sometimes because I use some older patches. I use a lot of Evolve. I like that a lot. Oh, yeah. And 3, but I just like the ticky-tacks in there. I love the kind of stuff. And then the third thing is set up your templates. So as you said, you can be fast, and then understand that if you're going to be fast, don't be too artistically invested in it. And that was a big thing I had to learn, which is why I have this custom orchestral template that I've been working on, where I'm actually opening up the instruments and playing with them to make them do what I want them to do. Because that's the template I want to use for like I'm doing in a couple of weeks, I'm doing a little podcasting for a D&D podcast, and I'm like, I'm really want to do something that's going to sound like Conan the Barbarian,
right,
So I'm like, all right, I got to dig into
when you think of D&D music, what does it sound like? Yeah,
not just like whatever patch is loaded in Albion, but like I want to make the orchestra do. And and here's again going back to like the great thing about this industry is if you put the time in, you can do almost anything, man. I still go back and listen to Thomas Bergerson stuff from 2003, and it still sounds better than anything that I've done, And so. But so that was the point you brought up, which was really good about like knowing your audience, knowing your market, and knowing when it's time to be like super creative and when it's time to be about delivering the product.
Right.
I think that's why a lot of TV composers at some point in their career release an album, because I think they're like, I just got to do something for me, right?
Yeah, like that's what it is. You got
to have a vanity project or whatever. Which
they do
is
their artsy fartsy project where I gotta
I got a couple that I'm picking out. Like Sarah and I want to do a kind of a Celtic New Age thing. I'm a big, she's a big New Age person, and my wife's a really, really good singer. So look, I've used her on a couple of pitches and stuff like that, and I think I've used her on a game once. She's Irish, so it's like, weird ethereal vocals. Yeah. I was like, yeah, you're legit, man. You know what's going on with it, But yeah, I think, man, I'm telling you, like, I know we're kind of drifting all over the place, but
fine. There's
so many great areas to be a composer. And they're oftentimes in places you wouldn't think. Like I would have never thought that this, kind of direct-to-video film kind of stuff would be something that was a viable place to do work. And not only that, was a lot of fun.
Right.
And
that's one thing I tell composers. I mean, like I said, I'm still kind of green. I helped out on a short film locally here. I had to do a piece for him because the composer couldn't do it. So I did it. He loved it. And then I'm working on another one kind of. It's like you're saying, it's like these cheesy things, it's somebody doing it for fun. It's like, but that's learning. You're learning how to do stuff. And it's what I tell everybody is like, dude, start local. Find out who's making movies in your town. and start there and make relationships with these filmmakers, because you don't know where they're going to go. Their budgets are going to get bigger, and all that stuff. So start local. That's how you find people.
That's a huge thing. And then the other thing is and I'm seeing this on the you're absolutely right. Start local. Totally have to do that. But the other thing is, and this is something I'm bad, I need to do more of. Make music you're proud of and put it out there, because I am now hearing all these stories, especially in the video game industry. So, because ready, what are video game developers? 90% of them are like programmers. So what are they doing? All day they're sitting typing with their earphones on.
Listening to music.
I can cite multiple examples, including Deus Ex Human Revolution, where these guys were like, this artist, I keep on listening to him while I'm coding, and I really like his sound. Let's reach out to them. It was Michael McEwen or McCann, whatever his name was. That's literally what happened. They were like, we like music. Would you like to score? And so the dude got a major AAA title. Yeah. Blakis did a similar thing. He was putting his music out there, and he was doing online, and of course you can do online. It sounds so bad when I say it. So you can do online relationships, but
now he's doing Star Wars, man. He's doing all the Star Wars stuff, Battlefront. So,
exactly.
Dude, I like Blakis, man. His stuff is killer, dude. I love his stuff. God,
he's so great, and he's got that great attitude. He's so Australian. He's just it's such a nice guy. But I'm just so happy he's had the success, and I just want him to continue to have that success. And boy, there's another great case in point, man. It's like you're just doing it. He just made a decision of like, this is what I want to be good at. This is what I want to get known for. He knew what he was willing to compromise, and not he wasn't going to move to LA.
Right.
But you know what? He's got a career that many of the LA composers will be jealous of. I mean, he's in talks with EA working on trailers for Star Wars, and he's doing
better than that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, come on, man. It's so.
That's back to my thing. It's like, you don't need. I mean, you should probably be in LA, but there's composers out there proving it. You don't. You could be anywhere in the world, as long as you can bring the goods. You can write the music they want to hear. They'll hire you, and they'll make it work.
And that's the thing, to really hammer this point home. You got to be creative and think about who needs your music and who values it. I mean, here's an example, because I cut my teeth in jazz, and I was a film composer. And about 2 years ago, I would, again, in my little local church, my ensemble, we would do a particular Catholic music chart, and it would be just really badly done, like from the publisher. And I was like, just give me that thing, and I would just reharmonize it and just do it, because I know how to do that. I'm an arranger. And I did this for about 10 or 12. And then all of a sudden my friends are like, you really need to reach out to these publishers, because a lot of the stuff you're writing and you're arranging, and I'm also writing original pieces for like, we need something for Easter. All right, well, give me the text and I'll just do a quick little thing. Yeah. And so now I'm approaching Catholic music publishers. I would have never thought of that 10 years ago. Yeah. I'm like, really? But they need, and they value it, and there's budget for it. And so there, I've just started to do that this summer and this spring, so I'm still waiting to hear back from them. But there's an income stream, and like, who would have ever thought? And so, like anything else, if there's one thing I heard from a friend of mine who's out in LA, it's that we are now becoming content creators. Yeah, like we really are. And the more we can think about that, of creating content, the better off we'll be, which ties in again with what you said about, like, we can't get too married to stuff. Our job is to put stuff out there, understand when it's art and when it's not. Get your sometimes there's no substitute. You got to get your craft up. You got to get your speed up.
You have to know what you're doing and, be proficient. But there's like Mike Verda says, there's art and commerce. Don't feel bad about trying to make money with your music. There's nothing wrong with that. And a lot of people get hung up. I think it's a thing when you're young. Like I was too. It's like, well, I got to be, it's got to be this technically proficient, great. It's like, no, it doesn't, dude. Just put something out there, and you'd be surprised how many people love it, because you're too invested. You're too close. And
we're listening with ears that we've been honing for years and years and years. People don't even like, when we did a concert for Easter called Tenebrae, and it was solid. It's a good, but there's a couple pieces where our choir just like flubbed it, and it's fine. Like, we had nerves, and I was going through listening, and I was ticking off. I was like, nah, we missed that. And then afterwards, everyone was like, that was amazing. And of course, I was like, didn't you hear like the 15 mistakes we did on that? But
nobody does.
Nobody does, because they're so minor.
And that's another thing with like libraries and sample. I was like, dude, your listener, who you're writing it for, cannot hear the difference. Like, they might a little bit, but if it's done really bad, your production's bad, of course they're going to hear a difference. But 99% of the people out there that's going to listen to your music don't care what reverbs you use, you know what I mean? So it's like, we get hung up on that stuff. But it's important, of course, because if you get a job,
Right, but no, but you're absolutely right. Like when I started submitting those cues, and I couldn't stand some of them for the film I worked on. The working title was Blood Brothers, but I think, or maybe it was Mind Games. It changed titles like 3 times. That's why I was like, I don't know. And I would play these things, and I'd be like, God, I'd be talking to my wife, like, Sarah, this is on the email back, and he was like, this is amazing.
Awesome.
I was like, really? Because all I could hear is like,
and that's all that matters. That's all that matters at the end of the day, dude. That's the thing too. Like the music you love that you wrote, it's like, dude, I love this piece. Dude, I don't like it. And then the one you hate, they're like, dude, I love it. It's great. So you never know. You can't be your judge. You can't be your own, you got to let the world decide, what's good
totally.
and what's not.
And that's probably the hardest thing, which is to like let the world decide, meaning your job is to put stuff out there. And I'm really guilty. Jay Diggity's constantly bashing me on that. He's like, you got to put more stuff out. I'm like, I will, I promise. Let me see if I can find, I'm going to do it right now.
I did like a live stream. I do like composing live streams. Like I'm giving it a shot. I like doing them, but then I don't like doing them because I'm not very quick, but it forces me to compose, you know what I'm saying? Because now I have an audience maybe. And it's dude, sitting there with people, that's the most stressful thing ever. Like being on a live stream, trying to compose music and people watching you. It's like, dude, holy crap. It's a mind, And
I wonder if I should try that. I've never tried that. I think you should,
man. But I've noticed a lot more composers doing this thing, like putting more content out there. I've noticed it more. And I started like a year or 2 ago. I'm just going to do this for fun because I remember when I was there, man, not knowing a damn thing. I'd go to VI Control and then you'd get flamed or, like something would happen to you. And then, so it's like, I'm trying to put a community out there for young guys or anybody really. And like, dude, this is what you need to know because I didn't know and I'm trying to help you at the end of the day. And that's why I do these interviews and then I do track reviews. Not that I'm an expert, but I think it helps.
Just getting information out there,
and I learn too, and it helps me because then I start picking up those patterns what everybody does when they write, and like, oh, you broke the pattern. You're not doing this. You start recognizing that stuff, and it helps.
And I think there's no better way to drill something down than to have to teach it. I really believe that. Like, every single time one of my students asks me a question, I have to like teach a concept, whether it be production or whether it be, so like, it just drills it into my head of like, whoa, okay. So it's this weird focusing and so maybe I will do that actually. And actually that'll be a good kick in the butt for me because I do have to finish my production template and then I can just start writing production music. That'd be kind of fun actually.
Yeah, dude, just like try it out one time. Just like do it on YouTube since that's where your audience is. And cause I did the Twitch thing and YouTube, but it just gets kind of messy, just try to keep it at one home, and I think it'd be cool, man.
Plus, I'll give Google all of my information. Like I'm all in on Google. I'm like, I don't care about privacy. I'm like, whatever, dude.
Facebook knows everything. Don't worry about it. We've already given that boat's already sailed a long time ago.
So now, what are you working on for your project right now? What do you have kind of tucked away in your wheelhouse?
I don't have any music stuff. That's a shame. I did one little thing. One of my subscribers, he needed a guitar player to do some ambient thing. So he jumped in. I have a Discord chat. I'll invite you to it. It's just like for the composing for the YouTube channel. But I'll invite you to it. And he got on my Discord channel. He's like, hey, dude, can you do a guitar thing real quick? I'm like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. I made like $20. I was like, I could have charged him more, but I was like, dude, because it took me a little bit longer because I wanted to dial in sounds and put real guitar and do it legit, but he needed it in an hour. And I was like, dude, I can't do it in an hour, because I had to like learn the piece and it was like very Blade Runner-y. I was like, dude, you don't need a lot of ambient stuff because you had all these synths and shit like going on. I was like, dude, it's already it's like it's fine the way it is, man. But I did a little thing and so I made $20 off of one of my subscribers in my Discord. Like you don't know where your jobs are going to come from, man. So but music I don't really have anything. Like I said, I've been trying to grow my freelancing I'm an instructional designer. That's what I went to school for and that's what I've been doing for like the last 10 years basically to make a living. So that's what I'm doing, and like I'm building that business, and you know how it is to build a business. It's a nightmare. So I'm trying to do music, and it's just been on the back burner, man. And I can tell because like I'm not writing, and it's like I'm starting to get agitated.
You're gonna get that antsiness where you're like, this is not.
But then I sit down to try to write something, and it's like, ugh.
And that's the hardest thing because like that you're like pinching the faucet, you're pinching the hose at that point. It's like I gotta write, but I gotta write now, and that by the way is the hardest trick. And again, going back to martial arts, it's like staying relaxed when you're under pressure. It's like, okay, I gotta write this thing in 2 hours, and be like, getting yourself in that mindset where you could say, I got this, I can do this. This is not a big deal. And I don't know necessarily the answer for doing that, except the ways that for me, transcribe starts. Yep. This is a couple things. Transcribe stuff, right? Become good at transcription. So if you have to do something fast, like I had to do a cop show drama cue about 6 months ago. And I was like, just give me a day. Yeah. And I spent the morning transcribing, or, a couple hours. And then the afternoon I laid it out. And the next morning I mixed it. And I was like, okay, but I knew how to transcribe. Focus on doing the things you're good at. Don't worry about being a jack of all trades. Like I focus, I'm doing a lot of I said crime drama. I'm very good at that. It's very easy. I'm doing a lot of retro 70s stuff because I like Goldsmith. Here, I'm gonna play this for you. This is one of the
cool stuff, man. Like there's some good 70s stuff, and that's and like you touched on something. It's like find out what you do well and do that, and
start with that.
Yeah, start with that.
Yeah. Because if you try and do what the market will bear, you'll be doing ukuleles and snaps in no time, or you'll be doing super synth sound design, which is great if you like it. Joey Crack's just really good at that, and he and I joke about that all the time. It's like he's he's always like, I did 5 tracks in a day. I'm like, that's awesome. He's like, yeah, of course. It's just downers and hits, and I'm like, hey man, it pays the same amount. You know what I mean? I was like. So here's a great example though of finding your niche. So this cue, I think, let me see this cue is when the second murder happens. It's this girl walking through an alleyway. It's a shame. Oh, this is all audio anyways. But so the girl's walking through an alleyway and she keeps on turning around and there's nothing there. And then she turns around, there's nothing there. It's like your typical. So for some reason I was doing this and I was doing your typical horror clusters and things like that. But then I was like, she starts walking. And the scene has this kind of tempo because as she's walking, you can see the killer, but just part of his body. It's very, and I looked at it and I was like, this is very like the Incredible Hulk. This is very retro. So I was like, and I've been on this Goldsmith kick. And I was like, you know what this has? This has that retro harmony and force.
Oh yeah.
It's kinda, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I started playing with that, this. That kind of First Blood kind of thing. So I started doing that and the guy loved it. So I don't know if you can hear it. Can you hear it?
Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
So this is
dude, I just bought that soundtrack. First Blood. Yeah,
so good.
It's so good.
Here's the
Yep. That's very yeah.
That's right, our First Blood, right? Yeah.
With the pianos and that's very of that style too, that genre. And I watched First Blood. I actually watched it again, I think about a couple of weeks ago for the first time in years. And when that opening theme comes in with the horn, I knew it was Goldsmith right away, dude. I was like, dude, that's Goldsmith. And I went and bought it on iTunes, man. Right away. I was like, I didn't know he scored that film. And but I knew right when it came in, I knew it was Goldsmith. He's just got a very signature thing with horns, especially trumpet. He loves that muted trumpet.
Yes, he does, and it's because I don't know if he has a jazz background or not, but he fell in love with that. I know he studied some classical music. They all have studied at some point, but he fell in love with that muted trumpet sound. Yep. And there's something. I had a similar thing when I was listening to Rudy and Hoosiers in separate occasions.
I love that theme.
Right, that thing. And I was like, dude, this really sounds some Goldsmith. I just flipped it. Oh, it's Goldsmith, you know. And Hoosiers, man, like, oh, maybe I'll do that for Farco Friday. I got to do one on Friday. I was thinking about starting to do this. I was thinking about while I'm biding time, while I'm finishing up my template and all that stuff, maybe I could do one. Tell me what you think of this. Maybe I was going to do a series where I would just talk about a particular genre of music and we'd listen to some classical stuff by it and then some film music. So I was thinking about doing like Americana and be like, hey, this is Americana. And then we'd listen to like some Copeland and then like The Natural and like, you know, Feel the Dreams. But I was thinking about doing sports movies.
Okay, yeah.
And then we do like Rocky and like Hoosiers.
Because you don't hear a lot about that. I mean, I don't really hear about, you know, sports movies, like people talking about them or composers writing in that style. I mean, it's a thing. I mean, there's sports. I don't think there's a lot of sports movies per se, but it's a good thing to know because now you'd be that guy. Yeah, I like the Rudy theme. That's a really good one. That's a great score, man.
Goldsmith is
like what you could do is pick a genre and then maybe write a demo cue in that style and then find out, say, hey, well, if you like that music, here's where you would go to study it.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That'd be kind of cool. Yeah, I gotta get something put together by Friday, so I'm shooting that. So
I'm sure you'll come up with something. I mean, you usually do.
I can usually
I didn't know you did the last one. I haven't been on Discord a lot, and like I said, I've been busy and trying to get this other.
Oh, it's fun, and I
watched it later. I always watch them later.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. It's a weird time too, especially with kids. It's like 3 o'clock. It's like Catherine's old enough. You see her like she toddles in and does her thing.
Not my kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so they're still young.
So you're on their schedule, So I think I'll do like sports movies or American, and I'll save fantasy, and because that could be like 5
fantasy,
or 6.
You could knock that out.
Fantasy one or sci-fi, but like classic sci-fi, like Stargate and Star Trek.
Oh, Stargate, that's another great.
Dude, David Arnold, he's so good.
That's so good.
See,
people don't write like that no more, man. That's the problem. Like all those good scores that nobody knows about. And it's just like, God, it's so good. And I was watching Heat, the movie Heat from '95.
Yeah, with De Niro, right?
Yeah. And I was like, dude, you can hear stuff in that score from '95 that you would hear today. Like there was like drum stuff and like the synths, like, I was like, so we're not really doing anything new per se. I mean, it's been done. It's just that the Zimmery thing's kind of new. I mean, what he's doing with the orchestra, because it's not really legit.
And not only that, and not only that, but it's like it's been done so much that this is the expectation has dropped so much in terms of what cannot invade the movie that now it's getting down to the point where it's all about sound. It's not even about a rhythm.
Sound design. That's all it is.
Yeah, sound design. We've eliminated harmony, we've eliminated melody, and we've now started to eliminate rhythm. I mean, and I'm sorry, I'll say this, and it's okay because I have no career to speak of, but I got in a big argument with one of the guys at Discord. It was a very healthy argument. It wasn't like, you're an asshole, but it was about Dunkirk, and I was like, I couldn't stand that.
I tried listening to it. I'm just like, okay. What are we listening here? For what he does, like it works. I guess if you saw the picture, but like one thing that I remember Mike saying was, dude, if it can't live on its own, you know what I mean? Like it's not real peace. It doesn't hold water. Like John Williams, you can listen to John Williams music without the film, and it stands on its own. Yeah, it tells a story, and like these newer, but that's the thing with filmmaking today. They're not telling a story; it's telling a 9-act structure, and it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a reflection of what filmmakers are doing.
Exactly, and it's them not understanding. And I got a lot of things, and that's why I was actually very surprised that Chris Nolan did it, because a lot of times I'm like, okay, it's because directors aren't learning their history. They're not studying, not just Spielberg, but like what's his face who did with Prokofiev, who did the Battleship Potemkin, Eisen, whatever his name is, or like early the guy who did I'm blank on the names. This Coffee Should Be Helping. The guy who did whatchamacallit, Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, and early Coppola. Like they're not studying that craft, and because of that, they're not understanding a lot. They're not understanding a lot about editing and pacing, and that's like the whole shaky cam thing and the whip cam, which what's his face pioneered in the Bourne Identity. He did it very well, but then everyone's jumping on it because it's the hot thing. But they're not studying the craft, so they just kind of throw it in willy nilly. And it's the same thing with music. They don't understand how music was properly done,
set to the movie and tell a story and be the emotion
out. And actually when I got to the argument about Discord or about Dunkirk, I was very careful to say this. It was really funny because I was on the chat and I said, I got to be very careful to say two things. One is when somebody asks me how film score is, and I'm going to say it here, lest some of the followers are like, dude, you're bashing Zimmer. And I was like, no, Last Samurai is one of my favorite scores. Drive Miss Daisy is freaking phenomenal. I grew up on the Rock. Don't shut the fuck up.
Dark Knight. I love Dark Knight.
Dark Knight was solid.
Oh, yeah.
I found it to be, it was very dramatically exciting. I found it to be him moving away from hummable melodies.
Right.
But it was really well written. But
so that movie, it worked perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And he knew how to get about to address the issues with Dunkirk that he didn't do in Dark Knight. So I said, there's two things. One is when you ask someone what they think of a film score, there's two aspects. One is, can I discuss its effectiveness as a film score? Like, is it doing what a film score should be doing? And that's something you can kind of quantify. You could say it's supposed to do this, this, and this, and it did these things. And so, and the second is, did I like it? Mm-hmm. And if you say I liked it or I didn't like it, the conversation's kind of over. Like in terms of it's like saying like I like chocolate and I don't like chocolate. Well, why do you like chocolate? Well, because I do, So I was very careful to say it. I'll say, listen, we're going to go into two areas. It's going to be, I'm going to say whether I liked it or not, and then I'll just say whether I thought it was an effective film score. So then Jelly was like, what do you think? I'm like, oh, I fucking hated it. I was like, hated it. It was one of the worst scores I've heard ever. And so then he starts arguing, well, it's a great score. I'm like, all right, well, now we're getting into why it's a great score. Yeah. And I said, and then I got into my nerdy professor moment. I said, look, what a score should do is a couple things. It should follow and enhance the dramatic beats of the story. And if you've read Robert McKee's story or you've read The Writer's Journey, which are 2 books that every film composer should read, in my opinion, that maps out 3-act structure. It maps out the hero's journey. It maps out all reversals and beats and all that stuff. So I'm like, so a film score needs to follow and support the dramatic beats, right? And you should be able to and Williams does this better than
he's the master.
He's the master. It's Goldsmith. It's all. I mean, the guys that are legendary: Goldsmith, Horner, Silvestri, James Newton Howard, Michael Giacchino. They all do it. They all do it, man. So the plot does it. Yep. Second, it needs to understand its place in the sound spectrum, and at the easiest level, it can never obscure the dialogue. Yep. Dialogue is king.
Take you out of the picture.
Yeah, right. So right there, Dunkirk blew it both times. I could not hear the dialogue because the music was so damn loud. And I haven't seen it,
so that's the thing. Like, I've only listened to the score. I haven't seen the movie in the context, so I want to see it. But
it's and it completely ignores the dramatic beats. Like, it's cutting back and forth between critical scenes, and there's critical dramatic forwarding moments where a guy's like, "We have to do this. We have to go forward. We can't go back." And the music is just across it.
And a drone. It's just a drone. Basically. Yeah. So if you want to see a war movie done right, watch Save It Private Ryan and listen to John Williams score.
Or the other one is Band of Brothers by Michael Caine.
Oh God, I love that, dude. That was so good. I have it. I own that one, and I think that's sometimes even better than Ryan. I mean, I love it.
It's tough. They're
so good, man. And I think Thin Red Line. Didn't Zimmer do a Thin Red Line?
Yes, and that was a score, right? Yeah. And The Last Samurai is a phenomenal.
I love that score.
It's so magical, and like you said, with Saving Private Ryan, Williams gets out of the way of the dialogue. Yeah. He touches.
He knows when to make it. You know, when to put music, and that's just a skill, and nobody does that now. Nobody's doing it. It's just, I got the film in my sequencer. I was guilty because I did the first real short film I did. I just wanted to put music wall to wall. And it's like, you can't do that. You know, you got to learn when to do the music. And it's just people that haven't been trained and are not going back and watching the old movies. They're watching the films in the 90s and the 2000s, which was starting to break all that. And I've been going back and watching old films, and it's night and day, dude. You're just like, oh my God, we've lost something. I mean, we've lost storytelling.
And you also see how much can be done with so little. Again, going back to that First Blood, whatever that cool riff that he does, the frantic riff. It's like that thing he does, Goldsmith does, where it's like these stacked fists.
You're leaving out the most key person does a lot with a little Harold Faltermeyer, dude. Come on. Dude, Beverly Hills Cop. I mean, come on. It's just a synth.
Come on, that sounds awesome.
Top Gun. I mean, it was
oh my God, that stuff's amazing. And then you realize how much they're like, Goldsmith would do that with that was that cue that I did. I was influenced by him. I was like, dude, Goldsmith is just using cellos, basses, bassoons, and a piano. And he's getting this sense of dread. And when you watch these old 70s and 60s movies and TV shows, man, it's like where they had 9 people in the studio and they had to make 22 minutes of music. Right. Go back to Goldsmith when he was doing Gunsmoke and Prisoner, right? And all those things, the Prisoner or whatever he was doing back then. I have a couple of those cues. But yeah, it's a dying skill. It's a dying skill. And I can remember getting a lot of heat from some of the guys over a Discord, some of my TV friends who were because the way I did the movie, the way I scored this last film, and here's a great point that I brought up. I said what I did was I went and I spotted the film, which, as you know, is when you go through and you say, here's where the music's going to start and stop. I had a little template of each cue that was about a half page long, where I put musical notes, dramatic notes, instrumental notes, and okay, drama. He does this. The lovemaking scene starts here. They see this here. So I had those. I had about 20 pages of that stuff because there's 2 on a page. I had about 40 cues, and then I went and I used what they call a ClickBook or an app nowadays to figure out the timing of these, to click and this, that, and the other. And then I worked backwards and said, okay, this is how many beats I have, right? So it's like I have 48 beats, which in a 4-bar phrase is, 12 bars of music. And then I went to Sibelius and I put the movie away and I notated out in Sibelius everything. And I wrote notes. This is the flute. This is the strings. Then I went back into Sonar and played it all in. And a couple people, like I think it was Chobot, was like, dude, that's taking forever. And
but
now
that's
he's in
how they
TV.
did it. But that's how they used to do it.
That's how they used to do it. And I said, and when I do that, I can see everything. I put all the hit points in Sibelius, so I could see right here. And I was able to do hit points to the 16th note. So I was able to do things like when in the movie he pulls out a particular folder and it's got the name of someone previously thought dead.
Right. I
was able to do that flourish and have it hit. And I'll tell the guys this. I said, yeah, it may have taken a little longer, but I had such control over the drama. And here's the best part. I had 100% conversion on my cues.
Yep.
Not a single cue was sent back for a rewrite. Because by doing all those steps, I knew the pacing cold to within 0.3 seconds. So when my hits happened, they were like spot on and they made sense. And I could morph and modulate, you know, between the stuff. Right. So, man, I'm telling you, Todd, like, and I know it's kind of like, I'm not trying to bust them. Like, if you don't know how to read music, you're in a lot of trouble. You can definitely do it still in your DAW and you know, but I'm like, there is a value to doing it that way.
I mean, I have a film scoring book I bought that they use for teaching. It has all that stuff because I wanted to get into film scoring a long time ago. But and I think film scores, we see the movie too much and you don't get away from it to actually percolate in your mind and to absorb it and to really know what it is. There's a word for that, to
internalize it and
That's
functionalize it. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, if it's how can you get in your own mind and musically try to solve problems if you're being bombarded visually with the film the whole time? If you're like just kind of it's the same thing with mixing. Like I learned from my mixing guy who taught me mixing, which was really great. You know, everyone says like, okay, what you do is you make a loop of the area you want to mix. Let's say like you're working on the snare drum and you loop and you loop and then you drag frequencies up and down, you find problem stuff. He's like, that actually causes ear fatigue so fast. He's like, what you do is you listen to it once or twice, then you stop. And you envision the sound that you want. And then you move a couple of EQ bands to get that sound that you think you want. And then listen to it twice, stop.
Right.
Think about it again. And he's like, what's happening is then you're actively generating within. You're generating from within the result you want.
Yeah, we use this too much. We're using our eyes too much on screen and visually. We're not using these is what you should listen.
Yeah. The heart and the ears, you know? And when you – and boy, I'll tell you this, like when you're at a piano, and I get it, man, that's why I have two different templates that I'm building. Right. When you're to the gun for speed and it's television, it's just fucking TV. It's like, get out there, right? Sure, it's fine, But if you're doing something like a film where you really want to make something, the act of sitting at the piano and playing a Pete and imagining the flute versus playing the flute patch, there's value in doing it that way. When you're like when I play Leia's theme, even though it's on the piano, because I know it's a flute, I play it differently. I'm not playing. That'd be like a trumpet, right? Right. So
there's something to that. Yeah, there is, because you've internalized the orchestra. Like I said, that's why I'm saying if you're a new composer, you've never been to a live orchestra, you better go now, because you got to listen to how they enunciate and they talk and they phrase. It's all in phrasing, man. And that's one thing I've always done pretty well. I internalize all that because I've heard so much orchestra music, and so I get all that. I know what instruments can do. It's just now it's connecting the dots and knowing how to do it and write for it. So
what are you listening to right now for classical music? Do you have any pieces that are kind of floating around? Like I've been going back to some stuff. What do you have here?
Let's see here. I just bought Respighi, Hansen, and then Berlioz. Is it Berlioz or Belize?
Boulez or Berlioz?
And Dvorak. Yeah, so the romantic stuff because
Berlioz. Yeah, the French
Berlioz.
Guy.
Yeah. So I listening to that stuff.
Those are great, man. Is it Respighi? Is it the Rome?
It's all the stuff that from the John Williams masterclass that Mike Verda did. So these are some of the stuff he did, and I used to have them when I had Apple Music, and then I got rid of it, so I lost them. So I just went and bought them.
You can just buy them or just go to a YouTube channel and just do whatever. But I have a Spotify thing; they're all on there. It's great.
And then one thing I bought that I've never listened to before was John Coltrane. Love Supreme. So I bought that album. I started transcribing the bass line, dude.
It's good, man, right?
Yeah.
It's
fun. That's basically it. I mean, and then I listen to rock music and my typical stuff. But I have some Mahler and Wagner and all of them, dude. Mozart, Bach.
Just keep on listening, like you said, and listen. boy, this is hard for us to do, but try to remember also, not this is me, like we have to try to remember to sometimes turn off our analytical brain and just fall back
and
in
just
love
do
with
it, man. And just compose, just let it go. I'm very analytic. That's my problem. I like to solve problems, but yet I like to analyze stuff too. And like, it's a fight. Like I said, I'm fighting myself. I make this harder than it needs to be. Because like, you know, it's like, but that's welcome to being an artist and welcome to being a composer.
Well, and it's okay to do that. It's kind of like, again, like go back to the martial arts, right? Like there's a time where like when I was first learning like some of my boxing combos, jab cross, you do want to like microanalyze. You're like, oh, is my hip turning? And you want to do that because you want to get really granular with the process. And then there comes a point where you have to say, okay, now for the next 2 rounds, I'm just going to throw. I'm just going to throw, and my body will internalize some stuff and I'll make some mistakes, but then I'm just going to get lost in the moment. So as a composer, we got to be able to do that, to like switch the right brain, left brain. It's so
when you're new. I mean, you know, when you're new, like for me, this is a new thing. And I mean, I've been messing with it, and, you know, I've composed music on guitar and stuff like that, but you know, this is huge, you know, composing for an orchestra is, you know, it takes years to master this, and you know, decades, I should say, not years, decades.
but it's the best thing to like develop better at. Every single time you learn a new trick or you conquer a particular style of cue, it's like that is so cool. And also, the orchestra can be as big or as small as you want it to be. Like I actually fell back in love with a lot of Bernard Herrmann stuff because a lot of times his stuff was written for a smaller sound. There's also a great score that I transcribed because for some reason I was doing a movie that needed it. It was To Kill a Mockingbird by Elmer Bernstein. Oh, it's so beautiful, and it's like this crystalline little like small chamber orchestra, and it's so pretty.
Those guys, I mean, those guys are classical composers. Same with Williams. He's a classical composer that just fell into film scoring. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, really, you know, they're trained. All of them are trained, and that's what now these guys that we're listening to aren't, and you can tell. But
I mean,
style movies that they're making don't really go with the you know, that stuff that we love because we grew up with it, you know.
Exactly. And so that, and I'm with you, Todd, and that's why I keep on saying, like, we're all saying the same thing, which is going back to building a career. Boy, to really go full circle, what makes you happy? And I've always said this when I started doing these kind of smaller budget indie video games and these direct to video kind of cheesy, not cheesy, you know, a little more silly. I was like, I don't have the ability to do the productions that need to be done for those big Hollywood films. And I wouldn't be interested in writing that kind of music. Like I don't like what John Debney had to do for Transformers. He did it very, very well, but that kind of temp tracky, you know, kind of hybrid thing. I'm like, I don't like that. I wouldn't be happy doing that. Conversely, when I showed Sarah the titles of the 2 films I'm working on, that are these direct to sci-fi, like asylum films, they're kind of Sharknado. She was like, dude, you have to do this. I was like, of course I do. Of course. And everyone's like, all my friends, because we're all nerds, they're like, you have to do this. Like, of course I do. And I'm going to do it with this. And so, I mean, what's the most important thing in life? I am having a blast. I mean, I'm you know, I'm working on projects I love. I have time to get on with one of my friends, like today, when you're like, hey, let's put something together. I was like, okay, yeah, we can do this. You know, when I finish, I'd go downstairs to see my daughter. And I mean, like you got to build a
man. You're making money, you're making a living, and you're doing what you love.
Exactly.
That's what life's all about.